monk sworn to silence, a noblewoman running from a forced marriage, and a storm that changes everything. What happens when duty and forbidden love collide in the heart of a medieval forest? Their choices will shape more than their lives. They might rewrite fate itself. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The rain fell in relentless sheets across the northern English countryside, transforming the narrow dirt roads into rivers of mud and making travel treacherous for even the most experienced riders. The storm had begun at dawn, and now, as the gray afternoon light struggled to penetrate the heavy clouds, it showed no signs of abating. The ancient forest that bordered the lands of House Ashford stood dark and forbidding, its thick canopy of oak and ash trees offering little shelter from the downpour that seemed determined to wash away all traces of civilization from this remote corner of the realm. Brother Aldrich of Greystone Abbey moved through the rain with practiced ease, his heavy woolen cloak soaked through despite the layer of oiled leather he wore beneath it. At 28 years of age, he was younger than most of his brothers at the monastery, but his responsibilities were no less demanding. His broad shoulders carried a large leather satchel filled with medicinal herbs, bandages, and the few precious vials of prepared remedies that the abbey could spare for the villages under their spiritual care. His strong hands, calloused from years of working in the monastery gardens and helping with repairs to the ancient stone buildings, gripped the reins of his sturdy brown mare as she picked her way carefully along the treacherous path. The monk's face, though partially hidden by the hood of his cloak, would have drawn attention in any gathering. Strong features marked him as a man of uncommon handsomeness, with a square jaw covered by a neatly trimmed beard the color of autumn wheat, and eyes of a striking gray blue that seemed to reflect the stormy sky above. His physique, visible even beneath the layers of monastic robes and traveling clothes, spoke of a life that had not always been devoted to prayer and contemplation. The muscles of his arms and chest, developed through years of physical labor both before and during his time at the abbey, gave him the appearance of a warrior rather than a man of God. Aldrich had been summoned to the village of Millbrook, where a fever had begun spreading among the children. The village priest, Father Benedict, had sent an urgent message the previous evening, and despite the prior's concerns about the weather, Aldrich had insisted on making the journey. He had a gift for healing, a talent that had been recognized and nurtured during his 8 years at Greystone Abbey. The other monks often remarked that his hands seemed blessed by the divine when it came to tending the sick and injured, though Aldrich himself attributed his success to careful study of the ancient medical texts in the abbey's library, and to the practical knowledge passed down from Brother Matthias, the elderly infirmarian who had been his teacher. The path through the forest narrowed as Aldrich urged his mare forward, and he found himself thinking about the life he had left behind when he had taken his vows. He had been born into a family of modest means, the third son of a minor knight who served House Ashford. There had been no inheritance waiting for him, no land or title to claim, and so he had been given a choice: join the monastery or seek his fortune as a soldier. His father had hoped he would choose the sword, but Aldrich had seen enough of violence in his youth, had watched his eldest brother return from border skirmishes with haunted eyes and terrible scars. The monastery had offered peace, purpose, and the opportunity to serve God and his fellow men in a way that saved lives, rather than taking them. The rain intensified, and Aldrich pulled his cloak tighter around himself, though he knew it would do little good. His thoughts turned to the warm fire that would be waiting at the village priest's house, and to the sick children he would tend once he arrived. He calculated the supplies in his satchel, running through mental lists of symptoms and treatments, trying to prepare himself for whatever he might find. The fever that Father Benedict had described in his message sounded serious, but not beyond the scope of what Aldrich had treated before. He carried willow bark for reducing fever, honey and herbs for soothing throats, and poultices that could be applied to bring down inflammation. A sound cut through the constant drumming of rain, so faint that Aldrich almost missed it. He pulled gently on the reins, bringing his mare to a halt, and listened intently. There it was again, a low moan of pain coming from somewhere off the path, deeper into the forest. Every instinct told him to continue on to Millbrook, where children needed his help, but his vows as a monk and his nature as a healer would not allow him to ignore someone in distress. He turned his horse toward the sound, guiding her carefully between the trees. pushing aside low-hanging branches heavy with rainwater. The forest floor was treacherous, covered in fallen leaves that had become slick and dangerous. Aldrich's mare moved cautiously, her hooves seeking solid ground with each step. The monk's eyes scanned the shadows between the trees, searching for the source of the sound he had heard. He called out, his voice strong despite the howling wind and hammering rain. "Is someone there? I am Brother Aldrich of Greystone Abbey. If you are injured, I can help you." Another moan, clearer now, came from just ahead. Aldrich dismounted, leaving his mare ground-tied, and moved forward on foot. His heart quickened as he spotted a dark shape lying at the base of a massive oak tree. As he drew closer, pushing through a tangle of undergrowth, he realized it was a person, and from the quality of the clothing visible even in the dim light and pouring rain, a person of considerable wealth and status. The figure was that of a woman, lying on her side in the mud, her breathing shallow and labored. Aldrich dropped to his knees beside her, his healer's instincts taking over as he quickly assessed her condition. She wore a riding dress of deep burgundy wool, now soaked and stained with mud and what appeared to be blood. Over this was a cloak of heavy gray wool lined with fox fur, fastened at the throat with a silver brooch worked in an intricate pattern that marked her as nobility. Her dark hair, the color of polished mahogany, had come loose from its braids and lay plastered to her face and neck. With gentle hands, Aldrich brushed the hair away from her face, and even in her current state, even with her features twisted in pain and her skin pale from shock and blood loss, he could see that she was extraordinarily beautiful. High cheekbones and a delicate jawline gave her face an aristocratic elegance, while full lips and long dark lashes suggested a softer, more vulnerable beauty beneath the noble bearing. He estimated her age to be perhaps 24 or 25 years, a woman in the prime of her life who now lay injured and alone in the forest. Aldrich's trained eyes quickly found the source of the blood. A deep gash ran along her left side, just below her ribs, visible through a tear in her dress and the lighter undergarments beneath. The wound was serious, still bleeding, though not as profusely as it must have been initially. Near her lay the broken remains of what had once been a fine leather saddle, and a few feet away, partially hidden by ferns, he spotted a magnificent gray mare, also injured, attempting to stand on a leg that was clearly broken. "My lady," Aldrich said softly, leaning close so she could hear him over the storm. "Can you hear me? I am a healer. I am going to help you." The woman's eyes fluttered open, and Aldrich found himself looking into eyes of the most striking emerald green he had ever seen. They were clouded with pain and confusion, but even in her weakened state, there was intelligence and strength in her gaze. She tried to speak, but only a faint whisper emerged from her lips. "Please, help me." "I will, my lady. I promise you. I will do everything in my power to save you," Aldrich replied, his voice calm and reassuring, despite the urgency of the situation. He knew that moving her would be dangerous, but leaving her here in the rain would certainly mean death. The wound needed to be cleaned and stitched, and she needed to be gotten warm and dry as quickly as possible. He made a swift decision. There was a hunter's shelter he had used before, not far from here, a small stone structure built against a rocky outcropping. It was crude but dry, and it would provide the protection they needed while he tended to her injuries. First, however, he needed to stop the bleeding and stabilize her for the journey. Aldrich opened his satchel and pulled out clean linen bandages and a small flask of strong wine that he carried for cleaning wounds. Working quickly but carefully, he pressed a folded pad of linen against the gash in her side, applying firm pressure. The woman gasped in pain, her body tensing, and he murmured soothing words as he worked. "I know it hurts, my lady, but I must stop the bleeding. Try to remain still. You are safe now. I will not let any further harm come to you." Her green eyes fixed on his face, and he saw a flicker of trust there, a desperate hope that perhaps this stranger who had found her in the forest might indeed be her salvation. Aldrich worked with the efficiency born of years of experience, wrapping the bandages around her torso to hold the pad in place. It was a temporary measure, but it would have to suffice until he could get her to shelter. "My lady, I need to move you," he explained, his voice gentle but firm. "There is a shelter nearby where I can properly tend to your wound. I will be as careful as I can, but I fear it will still cause you pain. Can you bear it?" She nodded weakly, and Aldrich saw courage in her eyes despite the fear and suffering. He admired that courage, recognizing in it the spirit of someone who would not surrender easily to fate. Carefully, he slid one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees, lifting her with a strength that made the task seem easier than it was. She was not a small woman, tall and well-formed, but his years of physical labor at the monastery had given him the power to carry her without undue strain. The woman's head fell against his chest, and he could feel the rapid beating of her heart, the shallow rise and fall of her breathing. He walked as quickly as he dared back to where his mare waited, then faced the difficult task of mounting while carrying his injured burden. It took some maneuvering, but eventually he managed to settle into the saddle with the woman cradled in his arms. He wrapped his cloak around her as best he could, trying to shield her from the worst of the rain. The journey to the hunter's shelter took longer than Aldrich would have liked, every step of the horse jarring his passenger and drawing small sounds of pain from her lips. He talked to her constantly, partly to keep her conscious and partly to distract her from her suffering. He told her about the abbey, about the gardens where he grew his healing herbs, about the peaceful rhythm of monastic life. He did not know if she truly heard him or understood his words, but her eyes remained open, fixed on his face with an intensity that suggested she was clinging to his voice like a lifeline. Finally, the shelter came into view, a low structure of rough-hewn stone with a thatched roof that had seen better days but still kept out most of the weather. Aldrich dismounted carefully, still holding the woman, and kicked open the wooden door. The interior was dark and musty, but it was dry and out of the wind. A crude stone fireplace occupied one wall, and along another stood a simple wooden bench. The floor was dirt, but cleaner than the mud outside. Aldrich laid the woman gently on the bench, then quickly set about building a fire. There was a small stack of wood in the corner, left by the last hunter to use the shelter, and though it was not much, it would serve his purpose. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, arranging kindling and striking sparks with the flint and steel he carried. Soon a small flame caught and grew, and he carefully added larger pieces of wood until a proper fire blazed in the hearth, filling the shelter with warmth and light. Only then did he turn his full attention to his patient. In the firelight he could see her more clearly, and what he saw both impressed and concerned him. She was indeed a woman of remarkable beauty, but more than that, she bore the unmistakable marks of high nobility. The quality of her clothing, even ruined as it was, the jewelry she wore, and most tellingly, the signet ring on her right hand all spoke of wealth and power. The ring bore a crest he recognized after a moment of study, the crossed swords and rows of House Pemberton, one of the most powerful families in this region of England. Aldrich's mind raced as he considered the implications. House Pemberton was known to be embroiled in a bitter dispute with House Ashford over land and mineral rights. There had been skirmishes, accusations of treachery, and rumors of worse to come. What was a woman of House Pemberton doing alone in these woods, in Ashford territory? How had she come to be injured? And most troubling of all, what would happen when it became known that a monk from an abbey under Ashford protection had aided a Pemberton? But these questions, important as they were, would have to wait. The woman's life hung in the balance, and his duty as a healer superseded all political considerations. He pushed his concerns aside and focused on the task at hand. "My lady," he said softly, kneeling beside the bench, "I must examine your wound properly now and stitch it closed. I will give you something to dull the pain, but I will not lie to you. It will still hurt. Do you understand?" Her eyes met his, and he saw that she was fully conscious now, the warmth of the fire and the relative safety of the shelter having revived her somewhat. When she spoke, her voice was weak but clear, cultured and refined, confirming his assessment of her status. "I understand, brother. Do what you must. I place my life in your hands and in God's mercy." Aldrich felt something stir in his chest at her words, a feeling he could not quite name. He pushed it away, focusing instead on the medical supplies he needed. From his satchel, he retrieved a small vial of poppy extract mixed with wine, a powerful painkiller that he reserved for the most serious cases. He helped her drink a measured dose, supporting her head with one hand while she swallowed. "This will help," he assured her. "Give it a few moments to take effect." While they waited, Aldrich prepared his other supplies. He laid out clean linen for bandages, a curved needle and strong thread that had been boiled to prevent infection, more of the strong wine for cleaning the wound, and a paste made from honey and herbs that would promote healing and prevent putrefaction. His movements were calm and methodical, the actions of a man who had performed such tasks many times before. The woman watched him work, her green eyes following his every movement. Despite the pain she was in, despite her weakened state, Aldrich could feel the intensity of her gaze. It was disconcerting, this feeling of being observed so closely, and it made him acutely aware of his own reactions to her presence. He found himself wanting to reassure her, to promise her that everything would be well, in a way that went beyond his usual healer's manner. "What is your name, my lady?" he asked, partly out of genuine curiosity, and partly to distract both of them from what was to come. "If you wish to tell me, that is. You need not if it would cause you difficulty." She was quiet for a moment, and he thought perhaps she would not answer. Then, in that same refined voice, now slightly slurred from the effects of the poppy extract, she replied, "Eleanor. My name is Eleanor of House Pemberton, daughter of Lord William Pemberton, and sister to the current lord of our house." And she paused, taking a shaky breath. "And you are Brother Aldrich, you said, of Greystone Abbey?" "I am, my lady, and I swear to you on my vows and on my honor that I will do everything in my power to see you safely recovered from this injury." Eleanor smiled faintly, a ghost of what must normally be a radiant expression. "I believe you, Brother Aldrich. There is something in your eyes that tells me you are a man of your word." Aldrich felt warmth spread through him at her words, and he firmly told himself it was simply satisfaction at having earned his patient's trust. Nothing more. He could not allow it to be anything more. He was a monk, bound by vows of chastity and devotion to God. She was a noblewoman, so far above his former station that any thought of her in terms other than that of healer and patient was not only inappropriate but potentially dangerous for them both. "The medicine should be taking effect now," he said, his voice perhaps a bit more gruff than he intended. "I am going to begin. Try to remain as still as possible." With careful hands he cut away the damaged portions of her dress and undergarments, exposing the wound while preserving as much of her modesty as the situation allowed. The gash was deep but clean, likely caused by a sharp branch during her fall from the horse. He cleaned it thoroughly with the wine, and though Eleanor gasped and her body tensed, the poppy extract kept her from crying out. Then with steady hands and the precision of long practice, he began to stitch the wound closed. The firelight cast dancing shadows across the rough stone walls of the shelter as Aldrich worked with meticulous care, his needle pulling the thread through Eleanor's torn flesh with practiced precision. Each stitch had to be placed perfectly, close enough to hold the wound shut, but not so tight as to tear the delicate tissue further. He had performed this task countless times on injured villagers, on brothers who had suffered accidents at the abbey, even on animals that the local farmers had brought to him in desperation. But never had he felt such pressure, such an acute awareness of the life that depended on the steadiness of his hands. Eleanor remained remarkably still, though he could see the tension in her body, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the wooden bench, her knuckles white with the effort of remaining motionless. Occasionally, a small sound would escape her lips, a sharp intake of breath or a muffled whimper, and each time Aldrich felt it like a physical blow to his own chest. He found himself murmuring words of comfort, his voice low and soothing. "You are doing wonderfully, my lady. Your courage is truly remarkable. Just a few more stitches and the worst will be over. You are stronger than many warriors I have known." Her eyes, glazed somewhat from the poppy extract but still alert, found his face. "Tell me more about yourself, Brother Aldrich. Your voice helps me focus on something other than the pain. You said you came from a knight's family before taking your vows?" Aldrich paused in his work for just a moment, surprised by her request. Most patients in such situations either remained silent or spoke only of their own suffering. But Eleanor, even in her weakened state, seemed genuinely interested in knowing more about the man who tended her wounds. He resumed his stitching, considering how much to reveal. "Yes, my lady. My father was Sir Geoffrey, a household knight in service to House Ashford. A minor position, but an honest one. He had 3 sons, and I was the youngest." Aldrich's voice took on a distant quality as he spoke of his past, something he rarely did even with his brothers at the abbey. "My eldest brother inherited what little land and position my father had. My middle brother joined the church as well, though he went to a monastery in the south near Canterbury. I was given a choice between the monastery and a life as a soldier, and you chose God over the sword," Eleanor observed, her voice slightly dreamy from the medication but still perceptive. "Why? Forgive my boldness, but you do not look like most monks I have encountered." You have the build and bearing of a warrior." Aldrich smiled slightly, though she could not see his face as he bent over his work. "I am told that often, my lady. The truth is, I saw what war did to my eldest brother. He returned from campaigns with scars on his body and in his soul. I watched him wake screaming from nightmares, watched him drink himself into stupors to forget things he had seen and done. I decided that if I was to serve, I would serve by healing rather than by harming." "A noble choice," Eleanor murmured, "though I wonder if you ever regret it. Do you never miss the world outside those monastery walls? The freedom to come and go as you please, to have a family of your own?" The question struck closer to home than Aldrich would have liked to admit. He paused again, this time to tie off a stitch, using the moment to gather his thoughts. "I have my work, my lady. The sick and injured who need my care, the knowledge I gain from studying the ancient texts in our library, the peace of prayer and contemplation. These things give my life meaning and purpose." "But that is not truly an answer to my question, is it?" Eleanor pressed, and despite her condition, there was a sharpness to her observation that told Aldrich she was a woman of considerable intelligence. "You speak of duty and purpose, but not of happiness or contentment." Aldrich found himself at a loss for words. In all his years at the abbey, no one had ever asked him such direct questions about his inner life. The other monks respected the privacy of each man's spiritual journey, and the villagers he treated were too concerned with their own ailments to inquire deeply into his personal satisfaction with his chosen path. Now, lying injured in a hunter's shelter while rain pounded on the roof above them, this noblewoman whom he had known for less than an hour was asking him to examine truths he had carefully avoided confronting. "Happiness and contentment come in many forms, my lady," he finally replied, his voice carefully neutral. "I find satisfaction in my work. That is enough." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, almost apologetic. "Forgive me, Brother Aldrich. The poppy extract loosens my tongue, I think. I have no right to question you about such personal matters, especially when you have shown me such kindness." "There is nothing to forgive, my lady," Aldrich assured her, surprised to find that he meant it. Something about her directness, her willingness to speak honestly even in her vulnerable state, appealed to him in a way he could not quite explain. "You are simply making conversation to distract yourself from discomfort. It is natural and understandable." He completed the final stitch and tied it off with careful precision, then sat back to examine his work. The wound was now closed, the edges pulled neatly together. It would heal, he was confident of that, though she would bear a scar. He reached for the honey and herb paste he had prepared and began applying it gently to the stitched area, a final protective layer against infection. "The worst is over now, my lady," he told her. "I will bandage the wound, and then you must rest. Your body needs time to begin healing." As he wrapped clean linen around her torso, securing the bandages firmly but not too tightly, Aldrich became acutely aware of the intimacy of his position. His hands necessarily touched her skin, warm despite her ordeal, and he could feel the rhythm of her breathing, could see the way firelight played across her features. She was, without question, one of the most beautiful women he had ever encountered, and the realization troubled him deeply. He had been a monk for 8 years, and in all that time, he had successfully maintained his vows of chastity without difficulty. He had tended to women before, young and old, and had never felt anything beyond professional concern for their well-being. But something about Eleanor was different. Perhaps it was the circumstances of their meeting, the dramatic rescue and the life-or-death urgency of her treatment. Perhaps it was the way she looked at him, with those remarkable green eyes that seemed to see more than he wished to reveal. Or perhaps it was simply that, despite his vows and his chosen life, he was still a man, with a man's susceptibility to beauty and grace. He finished securing the bandages and quickly stepped back, putting distance between them. "You need dry clothes, my lady, or you will catch a chill that could be as dangerous as your wound. Unfortunately, I have nothing suitable to offer you except my spare robe." Eleanor looked down at herself, seeming to truly notice for the first time the state of her clothing. The fine riding dress was ruined, torn and stained with blood and mud, and still damp from the rain. She nodded slowly. "Your spare robe will do admirably, Brother Aldrich. I am grateful for whatever you can provide." Aldrich retrieved the garment from his satchel, a simple brown robe of rough wool, and turned his back to give her privacy as she struggled to remove the remnants of her own clothing and don his robe. It hung loosely on her frame, far too large, but it was warm and dry, and that was what mattered. When she indicated she was finished, he turned back to find her seated on the bench, wrapped in the oversized robe, looking oddly vulnerable despite her noble bearing. "Now you must rest," he instructed, his voice taking on the firm tone he used with stubborn patience. "Lie down and try to sleep. Your body needs rest to heal." "And what will you do?" Eleanor asked, though she was already lowering herself carefully onto the bench, clearly exhausted from the ordeal. "I will keep the fire going and keep watch," Aldrich replied. "The storm shows no signs of stopping, and we would be foolish to attempt travel in the dark in these conditions. In the morning, when you are stronger, we will discuss what should be done." Eleanor's eyes were already closing. The combination of the poppy extract, her exhaustion, and the warmth of the fire pulling her toward sleep. "Thank you, Brother Aldrich," she murmured. "I owe you my life." Aldrich watched as her breathing deepened and steadied, signaling that she had fallen asleep. Only then did he allow himself to truly consider the situation he now found himself in. He had saved the life of Eleanor Pemberton, a woman whose very presence in these woods raised troubling questions. What had she been doing here, alone and unguarded? Where had she been going, and why? And most pressing of all, what would he do with her now? The monastery was under the protection of House Ashford, and he knew that harboring a Pemberton could be seen as an act of betrayal by his lord. Yet how could he, as a man of God and a healer, turn away someone in need simply because of political allegiances? His vows required him to offer aid to all who suffered, without consideration of their rank or affiliation. But he also knew that the real world rarely operated according to such pure principles. As the night wore on and the storm continued to rage outside, Aldrich kept his vigil by the fire. He periodically checked on Eleanor, ensuring that her breathing remained steady and that no fever developed from her wound. Each time he looked at her sleeping form, he felt that same troubling stirring in his chest, that sense of connection that went beyond the relationship between healer and patient. He tried to pray, to focus his mind on spiritual matters and divine guidance, but his thoughts kept returning to the woman who lay sleeping just a few feet away. He thought about the courage she had shown during her treatment, the intelligence evident in her questions, the unexpected vulnerability in her eyes when she had spoken of her gratitude. He found himself wondering about her life, about what had shaped her into the person she was, about whether she was happy in the world of noble politics and arranged marriages that would inevitably be her lot. These thoughts troubled him deeply. He was a monk, dedicated to God and to his calling as a healer. He had no business wondering about the personal life of a noblewoman, no matter how extraordinary the circumstances of their meeting. He reminded himself sternly that his duty was clear: tend to her injuries, ensure her safety, and then return her to her family as quickly and discreetly as possible. Nothing more. But even as he told himself this, even as he tried to focus his mind on prayer and proper thoughts, he could not deny the truth that was slowly becoming apparent. Something had changed in the moment he had found Eleanor in the forest, in the hours he had spent caring for her. A connection had formed, fragile and dangerous, that threatened the carefully ordered life he had built for himself. The rain continued to fall, and Aldrich sat by the fire, wrestling with thoughts and feelings that he had never expected to face. He had chosen the monastic life in part because it was safe, because it protected him from the complications and pain that came with worldly attachments. Now, in the space of a few short hours, that safety had been shattered, and he found himself standing at a crossroads he had never anticipated. As the first gray light of dawn began to filter through the gaps in the shelter's walls, Aldrich made a decision. He would do his duty as a healer and see Eleanor safely recovered from her injury. But he would also guard his heart carefully, maintaining the proper distance between them. What he felt, or thought he felt, was simply a natural human response to an unusual situation. It would pass, he told himself firmly. It had to pass. Eleanor stirred as the light grew stronger, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment she seemed confused, unsure of where she was. Then memory returned, and her gaze found Aldrich, still sitting by the fire where he had kept watch throughout the night. "Good morning, Brother Aldrich," she said softly, her voice hoarse from sleep and from the ordeal of the previous day. "You stayed awake all night?" "It was necessary, my lady," he replied, standing and moving to check her bandages. "How do you feel? Any increased pain or fever?" Eleanor considered the question, taking stock of her condition. "I am sore, certainly, and weak, but I do not feel feverish, and the pain is bearable. Your medicine and your skill have worked wonders." Aldrich nodded, satisfied. "The wound is healing as it should. You were fortunate, my lady. A few inches to the right, and the injury would have been mortal. As it is, with rest and proper care, you should recover fully, though you will bear a scar." "A small price to pay for my life," Eleanor said with a slight smile. "I have you to thank for that, Brother Aldrich. If you had not found me when you did." "It was God's providence that I was passing nearby," Aldrich interrupted, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "And it is my duty as a healer to aid those in need." Eleanor's smile widened slightly, and there was a knowing quality to it that made Aldrich wonder what she was thinking. "Of course, Brother Aldrich. God's providence and your duty, nothing more." There was a moment of silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the gentler sound of rain that had replaced the previous night's deluge. Eleanor shifted carefully on the bench, wincing slightly at the movement, and Aldrich immediately moved to help her sit up more comfortably. "We must discuss what happens next, my lady," he said, his voice serious. "The storm has lessened, though it has not stopped entirely. I was traveling to the village of Millbrook when I found you, to tend to children suffering from fever. They still need my care, but I cannot leave you here alone and injured." Eleanor's expression grew thoughtful, and Aldrich could see her mind working through the complications of their situation. "Millbrook is in Ashford territory, is it not? As is this part of the forest." "It is, my lady." "Then we have a problem," Eleanor said quietly. "I am sure you recognized my family crest. House Pemberton and House Ashford are not exactly on friendly terms at present. My presence here could be misinterpreted." "What were you doing in these woods, my lady?" Aldrich asked, the question that had been troubling him since he had first recognized her identity. "Alone and apparently fleeing from something or someone." Eleanor hesitated, and Aldrich could see her weighing how much to tell him. Finally, she seemed to come to a decision. "I was running away, Brother Aldrich, from a marriage that had been arranged for me, to a man I have never met but whom I know to be cruel and ambitious. My brother, the current Lord Pemberton, arranged the match for political gain, with no thought to my happiness or well-being." She paused, looking down at her hands. "I know it sounds foolish, the spoiled complaints of a privileged noblewoman, but I could not bear the thought of being sold like a piece of property to advance my family's interests. So I took my fastest horse and fled, hoping to reach a convent in the north where I have a distant cousin who serves as abbess. I thought she might give me sanctuary." Aldrich listened to her story with growing concern. He understood the position she was in, the terrible choice between duty to family and personal freedom. He had seen enough of noble politics to know that marriages among the aristocracy were business arrangements, with love and personal happiness rarely considered. But he also knew that her flight would have consequences, that her family would be searching for her, and that anyone who aided her could be seen as complicit in her rebellion. "Your family will be looking for you," he said carefully. "They may even now be searching these woods." "I know," Eleanor admitted, "which is why I must impose further on your kindness, Brother Aldrich. I need time to recover enough to continue my journey. Just a few days, perhaps, until I am strong enough to ride. If you could help me reach the convent, I would be forever in your debt." Aldrich felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every logical part of his mind told him that he should take her to the nearest Ashford holding, turn her over to their care, and wash his hands of this dangerous situation. It was the safe choice, the prudent choice. But when he looked at Eleanor, when he saw the desperate hope in her eyes and remembered the courage she had shown in the face of pain and fear, he found he could not do it. The decision weighed heavily on Aldrich's conscience as he studied Eleanor's face in the growing morning light. He knew that what she asked of him was dangerous, not just for himself, but for the entire abbey. Yet he also understood, perhaps better than most, the desire to choose one's own path rather than have it dictated by the accidents of birth and family obligation. Had he not made a similar choice when he had chosen the monastery over the life of a soldier that his father had envisioned for him? "I cannot take you to the convent myself, my lady," he said slowly, watching her face fall with disappointment. "But neither will I betray you to those who would force you into an unwanted marriage. I will help you recover your strength here, in this shelter, for as long as it takes. Then I will provide you with supplies and directions to reach your destination safely." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, though whether from relief or gratitude or simply exhaustion, Aldrich could not tell. "Thank you, Brother Aldrich. You risk much by helping me, and I will not forget your kindness." "I do only what my conscience and my faith demand of me," Aldrich replied, though he wondered if that was entirely true. Was it truly just conscience and faith that motivated him? Or was there something else, something he dared not name, that influenced his decision? He pushed the thought away and focused on practical matters. "But first I must attend to the children in Millbrook. The fever that afflicts them will not wait for our convenience." "Of course," Eleanor said quickly. "I would not have you neglect your duties on my account. I can remain here safely enough while you attend to your work." Aldrich shook his head firmly. "No, my lady. It is not safe for you to remain here alone, injured and vulnerable. What if your family's search parties come this way? What if your wound becomes infected and you need immediate care?" He paused, considering the options before him. "There is another way. I know of a place not far from here, where you can stay hidden while recovering. It is an old grain storage building on the edge of the Abbey's lands, abandoned for years but still sound and dry. I can take you there, ensure you are comfortable and have everything you need, and then continue to Millbrook. I can check on you each day as I travel back and forth." "You would do this for me?" Eleanor asked, and there was wonder in her voice. "A stranger, and a Pemberton at that?" "I would do this for anyone in need," Aldrich replied, though even as he spoke the words, he wondered if they were completely honest. Would he truly go to such lengths for just anyone? Or was there something about this particular woman that called to something deep within him? "Now we should prepare to leave. The rain has lessened to a drizzle, and the sooner we move you to safer shelter, the better." Over the next hour, Aldrich worked to prepare Eleanor for the journey. He checked her bandages, pleased to find no signs of infection, and gave her another small dose of poppy extract to help manage the pain of movement. He fashioned a makeshift sling from strips of her ruined dress to support her injured side, then helped her mount his horse, settling her as comfortably as possible in the saddle before climbing up behind her. The ride to the old grain storage building took nearly 2 hours, with Aldrich keeping the horse to a slow, careful walk to minimize jostling Eleanor's injury. She sat in front of him, leaning back against his chest for support, and he tried not to think about how aware he was of her presence, of the warmth of her body against his, of the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair despite her ordeal. Instead, he focused on guiding the horse along the safest paths, avoiding the worst of the mud and the most treacherous terrain. They spoke little during the journey, both lost in their own thoughts. But occasionally Eleanor would ask a question about the countryside they passed through, or comment on some aspect of the landscape, and Aldrich found himself responding with more detail than strictly necessary, telling her about the history of the region, the villages that dotted the area, the changing seasons, and how they affected the land. It was easier to talk about such neutral topics than to acknowledge the growing tension between them, the unspoken awareness that seemed to fill the air whenever silence fell. The old grain storage building appeared through the mist and drizzle like a ghost from another time. It was a solid stone structure, built to last, with a slate roof that had weathered many storms. The wooden door hung slightly askew on its hinges, but it still closed properly, and when Aldrich pushed it open and helped Eleanor inside, they found the interior dry and surprisingly clean. Shafts of pale light filtered through gaps in the walls, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. "It is not a palace, my lady," Aldrich said apologetically as he helped Eleanor sit on a pile of old grain sacks that someone had left behind, "but it will keep you dry and hidden." "It is perfect," Eleanor assured him, looking around with what seemed to be genuine appreciation. "I have slept in worse places during hunting trips with my father and brothers, and it has the advantage of being somewhere no one would think to look for me." Aldrich nodded, relieved by her acceptance of the accommodations. He spent the next hour making the space as comfortable as possible. He gathered fresh straw from a nearby field and made a proper bed in one corner, covering it with his own spare blanket and the one he had brought from the hunter's shelter. He built a small fire in a corner where the smoke would dissipate through cracks in the walls rather than billow obviously from the roof. He filled a leather water bag from a nearby stream and left it within easy reach, along with bread and cheese from his own supplies. "I will return this evening after I have finished in Millbrook," he told her as he prepared to leave. "I will bring more food and fresh bandages for your wound. Is there anything else you need?" Eleanor looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Only your continued discretion and kindness, Brother Aldrich." You have already given me far more than I had any right to expect." Aldrich felt heat rise to his face at her words and the intensity of her gaze. "I am simply doing my duty, my lady. Try to rest while I am gone, and do not attempt to move around more than necessary. Your wound needs time to begin healing properly." As he rode away from the grain storage building, heading toward Millbrook at last, Aldrich found his mind in turmoil. He had just committed himself to harboring a fugitive noblewoman, lying by omission to his brothers at the Abbey, and potentially endangering the monastery's relationship with House Ashford. All of this for a woman he had known for less than a day. What madness had possessed him? Yet even as he questioned his decision, even as he tried to convince himself that he was simply following his healer's oath to aid those in need, he knew there was more to it than that. Something about Eleanor had touched him in a way he had never experienced before. Her courage, her intelligence, her vulnerability, the way she looked at him as though she truly saw him rather than just the monk's robes he wore, all of it called to something deep within him that he had thought safely buried when he had taken his vows. The village of Millbrook greeted him with a mixture of relief and reproach. Father Benedict, the village priest, hurried out to meet him as soon as he arrived, his round face creased with worry. "Brother Aldrich, thank God you have come at last. We expected you yesterday evening. Did the storm delay you? The children grow worse by the hour, and their parents are beside themselves with fear." "Forgive me, Father Benedict," Aldrich replied, dismounting from his horse. "The storm was indeed fierce, and I thought it wiser to seek shelter than to risk the journey in such conditions. But I am here now, and I have brought everything I need to treat the fever." It was not entirely a lie, Aldrich told himself. The storm had been fierce, and he had sought shelter. He simply omitted the details of whom he had sheltered with and why. The guilt of the deception sat heavy in his stomach, but he pushed it aside and focused on the task at hand. The next several hours were consumed by his work. He moved from house to house, examining the sick children, administering his remedies, and instructing worried parents on how to care for their little ones. The fever, as he had suspected from Father Benedict's description, was serious but treatable. It was the same illness he had seen before, likely spread through the village's water supply. He prescribed willow bark tea to reduce the fever, cool compresses to bring down their temperature, and strict instructions about boiling all water before drinking it. By late afternoon, he had seen to all the sick children and felt confident that with proper care, they would all recover. The villagers were effusive in their gratitude, pressing small gifts upon him: fresh eggs, a wheel of cheese, a fine woolen scarf that one of the women had made. Aldrich accepted these offerings with humble thanks, knowing that the villagers could ill afford such generosity, but understanding that refusing would offend them. As he prepared to leave, Father Benedict walked with him to where his horse was tied. "You look troubled, Brother Aldrich," the priest observed. "Is something weighing on your mind?" Aldrich hesitated, torn between his need to confide in someone and his duty to protect Eleanor's secret. "I find myself facing a difficult moral question, Father," he admitted carefully. "What does one do when duty to one's vows seems to conflict with duty to those in need?" Father Benedict studied him thoughtfully. "Can you speak more specifically about the nature of this conflict?" "I am afraid I cannot, Father. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But I wonder, if helping someone, truly helping them in a time of desperate need, requires actions that might be seen as improper or even dangerous by others, is it still the right thing to do?" The old priest was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he considered the question. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "The path of righteousness is not always the path of safety, my son. Our Lord himself faced criticism and danger for helping those whom society deemed unworthy or inappropriate to aid. Tax collectors, prostitutes, lepers. He turned no one away who truly needed his help. But," he added, his expression becoming more serious, "we must also be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Good intentions can lead us astray if we do not also exercise prudence and wisdom." "Thank you, Father," Aldrich said, finding some measure of comfort in the words, even if they did not entirely resolve his dilemma. "I will pray for guidance." "As will I, my son. As will I." The sun was low on the horizon as Aldrich made his way back toward the grain storage building, his satchel now filled with fresh supplies purchased from the village, and the gifts the grateful villagers had pressed upon him. The rain had finally stopped, and the evening air was cool and clean, washed fresh by the storm. In other circumstances, Aldrich might have found the ride peaceful and restorative. Instead, his mind churned with conflicting thoughts and feelings. He thought about Eleanor, wondering how she had fared during the day alone in the abandoned building. Had her wound remained free of infection? Had she rested as he had instructed? And beneath these practical concerns ran a current of something else, a desire to see her again that had nothing to do with his duties as a healer and everything to do with the woman herself. When he reached the grain storage building and pushed open the door, he found Eleanor sitting up on the makeshift bed he had prepared, looking stronger than she had that morning. The firelight cast a warm glow across her face, highlighting the elegant bone structure and the intelligence in her green eyes. She smiled when she saw him, and Aldrich felt his heart skip in a way that alarmed him. "Brother Aldrich, you have returned. I confess I was beginning to worry. The work in Millbrook took longer than expected," he explained, setting down his satchel and moving to check her bandages. "Several children were quite ill, but they will recover, God willing. How do you feel? Any increased pain or fever?" "I am much better, actually," Eleanor replied. "The rest has done me good, and whatever you put in that paste you applied to my wound seems to be working wonders. The pain is much reduced." Aldrich carefully examined the wound, pleased to find that his assessment had been correct. The edges were clean, with no signs of the redness and heat that would indicate infection. The stitches were holding well, and the skin around them looked healthy. "You are healing remarkably well, my lady. You have a strong constitution." "I had a skilled healer," Eleanor said softly, and when Aldrich looked up, he found her watching him with an expression that made his breath catch in his throat. "I cannot imagine how differently things might have ended if you had not found me when you did." "We should not dwell on what might have been," Aldrich said, his voice rougher than he intended. He busied himself with unpacking the supplies he had brought, laying out bread, cheese, dried meat, and apples. "You need to eat to regain your strength. I brought provisions that should last you several days." Eleanor accepted the food gratefully, and they ate together in companionable silence for a while. But eventually, as the darkness deepened outside and the fire burned low, Eleanor spoke again. "Tell me more about yourself, Brother Aldrich. Yesterday you spoke of your family, but what of you? What dreams did you have before you entered the monastery? What did you give up when you took your vows?" Aldrich wanted to deflect the question, to maintain the proper distance between them, but something in her voice, in the genuine interest he saw in her eyes, made him answer honestly. "I gave up very little in truth," he said slowly. "I had no prospects, no fortune waiting for me. The life of a soldier held no appeal, and I had no desire to spend my days fighting other men's battles for scraps of land and glory. The monastery offered me something better: knowledge, purpose, the chance to help people heal rather than watching them die." "But what of love?" Eleanor asked quietly. "What of a wife, children, a family of your own? Did you never want those things?" The question struck at the heart of something Aldrich had never allowed himself to fully examine. "I never thought I would have them anyway," he admitted. "I had nothing to offer a wife, no way to support a family. And I had seen too many loveless marriages among the nobility, matches made for advantage rather than affection. I told myself that the monastery was the better choice." "And now?" Eleanor pressed. "Do you still believe that?" Aldrich looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment he allowed himself to imagine what might have been if he had been a different man, if she had been a different woman, if they had met under different circumstances. "I do not know, my lady," he said honestly. "Until yesterday, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now," he trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. Eleanor held his gaze for a long moment, and in her eyes he saw understanding, and something else, something that both frightened and thrilled him. "We should both rest," he said abruptly, breaking the moment. "You need to continue healing, and I must return to the Abbey before my absence is noted and questions are asked." The following days fell into a pattern that was both comforting and dangerous in its intimacy. Each morning, Aldrich would leave Greystone Abbey under the pretense of visiting various villages in the region to check on the health of their inhabitants. This was not entirely false. He did make such rounds regularly as part of his duties, but now his primary destination was always the old grain storage building where Eleanor waited. He would bring fresh food, check her wound and change her bandages, and then spend an hour or two in her company before forcing himself to leave and attend to his other responsibilities. With each visit, Eleanor grew stronger. By the third day, she was able to move about the building without assistance. though Aldrich cautioned her against overexerting herself. By the 5th day, the wound had begun to close properly, the angry redness fading to a healthier pink. Her color had returned, the pallor of shock and blood loss replaced by the natural flush of health. She was, Aldrich thought despite himself, even more beautiful now than when he had first found her. But it was not just her physical recovery that Aldrich witnessed during these visits. With each conversation, he discovered new facets of Eleanor's character that drew him to her in ways that had nothing to do with her outward beauty. She was well-read, having been educated by tutors who recognized her quick mind despite her gender. She spoke knowledgeably about history, philosophy, and even some of the medical texts that Aldrich himself studied. Her observations about the world were sharp and often surprisingly insightful, untainted by the casual cruelty that Aldrich had observed in many nobles. My father believed that an educated daughter was an asset, Eleanor explained one afternoon as they sat together near the fire. She was mending a tear in the spare dress that Aldrich had managed to procure for her from the Abbey's charity stores, her fingers moving with practiced skill. He said that noblewomen were too often dismissed as decorative fools, and that I should be prepared to hold my own in any conversation, whether with scholars or soldiers. He sounds like a wise man, Aldrich observed, watching the play of firelight across her features, and clearly his efforts were not wasted. You have a mind that would put many learned men to shame. Eleanor smiled at the compliment, but there was sadness in her expression. My father died 3 years ago. A fever took him, much like the one you treated in Millbrook. My brother inherited the title and the estates, and with them came responsibilities and ambitions that my father never had. Everything changed after that. Is that when the marriage was arranged? Aldrich asked gently. Yes. Lord Ashford's nephew, a man named Sir Hugh Denholm. He is wealthy, ambitious, and according to every report I have heard, cruel to those beneath him. My brother sees only the political advantage of the match. It would cement an alliance with House Ashford and end the disputes over our shared borders. My happiness, my future, my very soul. These things do not enter into his calculations. Aldrich felt anger stir in his chest at her words. Your brother has no right to sell you like a piece of property. Does he not? Eleanor looked at him with those penetrating green eyes. He is the head of our house. I am his unmarried sister. By the laws of the realm and the customs of our class, he has every right to arrange my marriage as he sees fit. I have no say in the matter, no power to refuse, unless I take the veil and enter a convent, which is precisely what I intend to do. But is that truly what you want? Aldrich asked, the question surprising him even as he spoke it. To spend your life behind convent walls, denied the possibility of a husband who might love you, of children, of a life in the world. Eleanor set down her mending and looked at him with an intensity that made his heart race. What I want, Brother Aldrich, has never been a consideration in the plans others make for my life. I learned long ago that wanting is a luxury that women of my station cannot afford. The convent offers me the only choice I have left, the ability to say no to a marriage that would destroy me. Is it what I dream of? No, but it is better than the alternative. What would you choose? Aldrich asked quietly. If you could choose anything. If there were no constraints of family or duty or station. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her eyes distant. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I would choose a life with someone who saw me as I truly am. Not as a political asset or a decorative trophy, but as a person with thoughts and dreams of my own. I would choose love, Aldrich. True love, freely given and freely received. I would choose to matter to someone, not for what my family name could bring them, but for who I am. The use of his name without his title felt like an intimacy that crossed a line they had been carefully dancing around for days. Aldrich found himself leaning toward her, drawn by something he could no longer deny or ignore. Eleanor, he said, and his voice was rough with emotion he had tried so hard to suppress. You matter. You matter more than you could possibly know. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, Aldrich knew that he had crossed a threshold from which there would be no easy return. What he felt for Eleanor was no longer the concern of a healer for his patient, or even the sympathy of one human being for another in distress. It was something far deeper, far more dangerous, and far more precious than anything he had ever experienced in his life. Eleanor reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his bearded cheek. And you matter to me, Aldrich. In these few days, you have become more important to me than people I have known my entire life. Is that madness? Am I deluding myself because you saved my life and showed me kindness when I needed it most? Aldrich covered her hand with his own, feeling the warmth of her skin, the delicate bones beneath. If it is madness, then we are both afflicted with it. I have tried to tell myself that what I feel is simply natural compassion, professional concern, but I can no longer pretend that is all it is. What are we to do? Eleanor asked, and there was both hope and fear in her voice. You are a monk, bound by sacred vows. I am a noblewoman fleeing an unwanted marriage. We come from different worlds, and the gap between them cannot be easily bridged. I do not know, Aldrich admitted. I know only that I cannot imagine my life without you in it, and that thought terrifies me more than anything I have ever faced. They sat together in silence, hands still touching, both grappling with the implications of what they had just confessed. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that filtered through the cracks in the walls. The fire crackled softly, and somewhere in the distance, a bird called out its evening song. Finally, Aldrich forced himself to pull away, to stand and gather his things. I must return to the Abbey. My absence will be noted if I stay longer. When will you come again? Eleanor asked, and the vulnerability in her question made Aldrich's heart ache. Tomorrow, as always, and every day after, until you are well enough to continue your journey. He paused at the door, looking back at her. Eleanor, I cannot promise you anything. I do not know how this will end, or if there can be any happy resolution to what we face. But I swear to you, I will not abandon you. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Eleanor smiled, though tears glistened in her eyes. That is more than I dared hope for, Aldrich. It is enough. It has to be enough. As Aldrich rode back to Greystone Abbey through the gathering darkness, his mind was in turmoil. He had violated his vows in spirit, if not yet in deed. He had allowed himself to develop feelings for a woman that went far beyond what was appropriate for a monk. He had complicated an already difficult situation with emotions that could only lead to pain and heartbreak. Yet even knowing all this, even understanding the dangers and the impossibility of what he felt, he could not bring himself to regret it. For the first time in his 8 years at the monastery, he felt truly alive. The careful, ordered existence he had built for himself suddenly seemed hollow and empty when compared to the richness of what he experienced in Eleanor's presence. When he reached the abbey and stabled his horse, he found Brother Matthias waiting for him in the courtyard. The old infirmarian had been Aldrich's teacher and mentor, and his weathered face showed concern as he approached. Brother Aldrich, the prior wishes to speak with you. He is in his chambers now. Aldrich felt his stomach tighten with apprehension. Had someone discovered his secret? Had questions been raised about his frequent absences? Did he say what he wished to discuss? He did not confide in me, Brother Matthias replied, but his eyes were searching as he studied Aldrich's face. But I have noticed that you seem distracted lately, troubled. Is everything well, my son? I am simply tired, Brother Matthias. The work in the villages has been demanding. It was not entirely a lie, though the exhaustion Aldrich felt had more to do with the emotional strain of his situation than physical labor. The old monk nodded slowly, but Aldrich could see he was not entirely convinced. Remember, my son, that the burden of secrets can grow heavier with each passing day. Sometimes the wisest course is to seek counsel before the weight becomes unbearable. I will remember, brother. Thank you. Aldrich made his way to the prior's chambers with a sense of dread. Prior Benedict was a stern but fair man, deeply devoted to the rules and traditions of their order. If he had discovered Aldrich's deception, there would be consequences. At best, Aldrich might face penance and restrictions on his movements. At worst, he could be expelled from the order entirely. He knocked on the heavy wooden door and waited for the prior's summons to enter. The chamber beyond was austere, as befitted a man of God. A simple bed, a desk covered with parchments and books, a crucifix on the wall, and little else. Prior Benedict sat at his desk, his thin face grave as he gestured for Aldrich to sit. Brother Aldrich, thank you for coming. I will not waste your time with pleasantries. I have received troubling news from Lord Ashford's steward. It seems that Eleanor Pemberton, sister to Lord Pemberton, has gone missing. She disappeared from her family's estates nearly a week ago, and there is some concern that she may have been abducted or met with foul play. Aldrich forced himself to remain calm, to show only appropriate concern at this news. That is indeed troubling, Father Prior. Do they believe she may be in this region? They believe it possible. Lord Ashford has asked that we report immediately if any of our brothers should encounter her or hear any news of her whereabouts. There is a substantial reward being offered for information leading to her safe return. Prior Benedict paused, his sharp eyes studying Aldrich carefully. You travel extensively in your duties as infirmarian, Brother Aldrich. Have you seen or heard anything that might be relevant to this matter? This was the moment of truth. Aldrich could confess everything now, turn Eleanor over to the authorities, and save himself from the consequences of his deception. It would be the safe choice, the prudent choice. But even as the thought formed, he knew he could not do it. He could not betray Eleanor, could not send her back to a fate she found intolerable. I have heard nothing, Father Prior. The villagers I visit speak of their own concerns, illness, crop failures, disputes with neighbors. I have heard no mention of Lady Eleanor or her disappearance. It was the first time Aldrich had told an outright lie to his superior, and the weight of it sat heavy on his soul. Prior Benedict continued to study him for a moment longer, and Aldrich wondered if the older man could somehow see through his deception. But finally, the prior nodded. Very well, but keep your ears open, Brother Aldrich. If you should learn anything, it is your duty to report it immediately. The alliance between House Ashford and our abbey is important. We cannot afford to be seen as harboring information that might concern Lord Ashford's interests. I understand, Father Prior. Good. You may go. And Brother Aldrich, try to get some rest. You look exhausted. As Aldrich left the prior's chambers and made his way to his own small cell, he felt the full weight of what he had done settle upon him. He had lied to his superior. He was hiding a fugitive noblewoman. He was developing feelings that violated his vows of chastity. And with each passing day, he was digging himself deeper into a situation that could only end in disaster. That night, Aldrich lay on his narrow bed, staring up at the ceiling of his cell, unable to sleep. He thought about Eleanor alone in the grain storage building, wondered if she was warm enough, if her wound was healing properly, if she was frightened. He thought about the life he had built at the monastery, the peace and purpose he had found here, and how all of it now seemed insufficient compared to what he felt when he was with her. He tried to pray, to seek divine guidance for the impossible situation he found himself in. But the words felt hollow, mechanical. How could he pray for strength to resist temptation when his heart yearned for the very thing he should be resisting? How could he ask for wisdom when every logical path before him seemed to lead to pain? In the darkness of his cell, Aldrich finally allowed himself to fully acknowledge what he had been trying to deny. He was falling in love with Eleanor Pemberton. Perhaps he had been since the moment he found her in the forest, wounded and vulnerable, yet still so strong. Perhaps it had happened gradually, with each conversation, each shared smile, each moment of connection. But the how and when mattered less than the undeniable truth. He loved her, and that love, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, would change everything. The dawn broke gray and cold over Greystone Abbey, mist rising from the ground like spirits reluctant to face the new day. Aldrich had barely slept, his mind churning with the conversation he'd had with Prior Benedict and the dangerous secret he now carried. As he dressed in his simple brown robes and prepared for morning prayers, he felt the weight of his duplicity like a physical burden pressing down on his shoulders. Yet beneath the guilt and fear ran a current of something else, a fierce determination to protect Eleanor, no matter the cost to himself. The morning prayers felt longer than usual, each Latin phrase a reminder of the vows he had taken and the promises he was now breaking. He knelt beside his brother monks in the cold stone chapel, his lips forming the familiar words, while his heart was elsewhere, in a grain storage building where a woman with emerald eyes waited for him. When the service finally concluded and the monks dispersed to their various duties, Aldrich gathered his medical supplies with hands that trembled slightly. Brother Matthias approached him as he was leaving the infirmary, the old man's weathered face creased with concern. "Brother Aldrich, a moment of your time, if you please." Aldrich felt his heart rate quicken, but kept his expression calm. "Of course, Brother Matthias. How may I help you?" The elderly monk studied him with eyes that had seen many years and many souls. "I have been your teacher and your friend for 8 years now, Aldrich. In all that time, I have watched you grow into one of the finest healers I have ever known. But I have also come to recognize the signs when something troubles you deeply." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Whatever burden you carry, you do not have to bear it alone. The confessional is always open, and my ears are always willing to listen without judgment." For a moment, Aldrich was tempted to confess everything, to lay his troubles at the feet of this wise old man who had been like a father to him. But he knew that confession would mean betraying Eleanor's location, and that was something he could not do. "I appreciate your concern, Brother Matthias. Truly I do. But this is something I must work through on my own. I am simply tired from the increased demands of tending to the villages. Nothing more." Brother Matthias sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Very well, my son. But remember what I told you yesterday. The weight of secrets grows heavier with time. Do not wait until it crushes you before seeking help." As Aldrich rode away from the abbey toward Eleanor's hiding place, those words echoed in his mind. The weight of secrets. How prophetic that phrase was. With each passing day, the secret he kept grew not lighter but more burdensome, intertwined now with feelings that made simple deception seem almost innocent by comparison. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of damp earth and dying leaves. Autumn was advancing steadily, and soon the first snows would come. Aldrich found himself wondering what would happen when winter made travel difficult, when his frequent absences would become harder to explain. But those were problems for another day. Today he needed to see Eleanor, to assure himself that she was well, and perhaps, though he tried not to admit it even to himself, simply to be in her presence. When he reached the grain storage building and pushed open the door, he found Eleanor standing by the window gap, looking out at the misty landscape. She had been attempting to braid her long dark hair, but strands had escaped to frame her face. The simple dress he had brought her hung gracefully on her frame, and in the soft morning light she looked like something from a painting, beautiful, ethereal, and utterly unattainable for a man in his position. She turned when she heard him enter, and her face lit up with a smile that made Aldrich's heart skip. "Aldrich, I was beginning to worry. You usually arrive earlier than this." "Morning prayers ran long," he explained, setting down his satchel and moving to check the fire, which had burned down to embers. "And I had a conversation with Brother Matthias that delayed me further. How did you pass the night? Any pain or fever?" "None at all," Eleanor assured him, moving to sit on the bed so he could examine her wound. "I feel stronger each day. In truth, I think I could probably travel now if necessary. The wound hardly pains me anymore." Aldrich carefully unwrapped the bandages, pleased to see that his assessment matched hers. The wound was healing remarkably well, the stitches doing their work, the skin around them healthy and pink. In another week, perhaps less, the stitches could be removed, and she would be fully recovered save for the scar she would carry. "You are healing better than I dared hope," he admitted. "Your constitution is truly remarkable. Or your skill as a healer is greater than you give yourself credit for," Eleanor countered. She caught his hand as he reached for fresh bandages, holding it between both of hers. "Aldrich, we need to talk about what happens next. I cannot stay here indefinitely, hiding while you risk yourself to care for me." Aldrich felt the warmth of her hands around his and fought the urge to pull her close, to forget about propriety and consequences, and simply hold her. Instead, he forced himself to think practically. "You are right, of course. But rushing your departure before you are fully healed would be foolish. Give it another week, perhaps less. Then, when you are strong enough to ride, I will help you reach the convent safely." Eleanor released his hand and turned away, her shoulders tense. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "And if I said I no longer wished to go to the convent? What then?" Aldrich felt his breath catch. "What are you saying, Eleanor?" She turned back to face him, and in her green eyes he saw a mixture of hope and fear and something else that made his heart pound. "I am saying that these days with you have changed something in me. You asked me what I would choose if I could choose anything, and I told you I would choose love. Well, I think I have found it, Aldrich. Here, in this abandoned building, with a monk who saved my life and then gave me something even more precious, the feeling that I matter, that I am seen and valued for who I truly am." "Eleanor, you cannot mean," Aldrich began, but she cut him off. "Cannot mean what? That I have fallen in love with you? But I have, Aldrich. I know it is impossible. I know it is foolish. I know there is no future in it. But I cannot help what my heart feels, any more than you can. Aldrich stood frozen, his mind reeling. She loved him. This beautiful, intelligent, courageous woman loved him. The joy that surged through him was immediately followed by crushing despair. "I am a monk, Eleanor. I have taken vows." "Vows that you took when you were 20, before you knew what you might be giving up," Eleanor interrupted, her voice passionate now. "Vows that bind you to a life you chose not because you truly wanted it, but because it seemed the only acceptable option available to you. Do you truly believe God would want you to be miserable, Aldrich? Do you think he would condemn you for choosing love over empty ritual?" "It is not that simple," Aldrich protested, though even as he spoke, he felt his carefully constructed defenses crumbling. "My vows are sacred. To break them would be a sin." "And what of the vow my brother would have me make to Sir Hugh Denholm?" Eleanor challenged. "Is that not also sacred? Yet you helped me flee from it, helped me avoid a marriage that would have destroyed my soul. How is that different?" "That is different because—" Aldrich stopped, realizing that he had no good answer. She was right. He had already chosen to help her break the obligations imposed on her by family and society. How could he now hide behind his own vows when they stood between him and the only woman he had ever loved? Eleanor stepped closer to him, so close that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "I am not asking you to decide anything right now, Aldrich. I know this is difficult, that there are consequences to consider, but I needed you to know how I feel. I needed you to know that what we have found together is real and precious and worth fighting for." Aldrich reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever known," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And what I feel for you terrifies me, because I know that pursuing it would mean turning my back on everything I have built, everyone who depends on me. But God help me, Eleanor. I love you. I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my life." The words once spoken seemed to hang in the air between them, momentous and irrevocable. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling, a radiant expression that transformed her already beautiful face into something luminous. "Then we will find a way," she whispered. "Somehow, we will find a way to be together." Aldrich leaned forward, and for the first time in his adult life, he kissed a woman. Eleanor's lips were soft and warm against his, and the sensation sent a shock through his entire body. It was nothing like he had imagined, both more innocent and more overwhelming than his limited understanding had prepared him for. She responded to his kiss with a gentle passion that spoke of her own inexperience, and for a long moment they stood there, holding each other, learning the taste and feel of one another. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Aldrich rested his forehead against hers. "I do not know how this can work," he admitted. "I do not know what path we can take that does not lead to ruin for one or both of us. But I cannot give you up, Eleanor. I cannot go back to pretending that what we have does not exist." "Then we will move forward," Eleanor said firmly. "One step at a time, one day at a time. We will find our way together." They spent the rest of the morning talking, making tentative plans, exploring the possibilities before them. Aldrich could leave the monastery. It was not unheard of for monks to petition for release from their vows, though it was a long and difficult process. Eleanor's situation was more complicated. She was still technically under her brother's authority, and any attempt to marry without his permission would be considered a grave offense. But if she were to take sanctuary in a convent first, petition the church for protection from an unwanted marriage, and then later choose to leave the religious life, there might be a path forward. It was not perfect, and there were countless obstacles they would face. But as they talked, as they planned, Aldrich felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time. Perhaps there was a way. Perhaps love could triumph over duty and tradition and the expectations of others. It would not be easy, but nothing worth having ever was. As the afternoon wore on, and Aldrich knew he would have to return to the Abbey soon, Eleanor brought up a concern that had clearly been weighing on her mind. "Aldrich, what you told me about your meeting with the prior worries me. If they are actively searching for me, offering rewards, how long before someone connects your frequent absences with my disappearance? You said yourself that Lord Ashford has asked the Abbey to report any information about me." "I know," Aldrich admitted. "It is a risk, but I will be careful. I vary my routes. I have legitimate reasons for visiting the villages. As long as no one has reason to suspect this particular location, We should be safe for a while longer. But we cannot risk your safety indefinitely, Eleanor insisted. Perhaps I should leave sooner. Perhaps waiting for my wound to fully heal is too dangerous. Aldrich shook his head firmly. No. Traveling before you are ready could cause the wound to reopen, could lead to infection. We will wait the full week until I am certain you are strong enough. Then I will help you reach the convent, and we will begin the process of securing our future together. Eleanor looked at him with such trust and love that it made Aldrich's chest ache. Very well, 1 week. But promise me that if you sense any danger, if anyone begins to suspect, you will tell me immediately. I will not have you suffer for helping me. I promise, Aldrich said, drawing her close for another kiss. We are in this together now, Eleanor. Whatever comes, we will face it side by side. As Aldrich rode back to Greystone Abbey that evening, his heart was lighter than it had been in days, despite the very real dangers that still surrounded them. He had spoken his love aloud, had been given the gift of Eleanor's love in return. They had a plan, fragile and uncertain though it might be. For the first time since he had found her wounded in the forest, he allowed himself to believe that there might actually be a happy ending to their story. But as he approached the abbey gates, he noticed unusual activity. Several horses stood in the courtyard, fine animals bearing the colors of House Ashford. Aldrich's blood ran cold. Something had happened, and he had a terrible feeling that whatever it was, it would not be good news for him or for Eleanor. He stabled his horse quickly and made his way toward the main building, trying to appear calm despite the anxiety churning in his stomach. Brother Matthias intercepted him before he reached the entrance. Brother Aldrich, thank God you have returned. Prior Benedict has been asking for you. Lord Ashford's men arrived an hour ago with urgent news about Lady Eleanor Pemberton. Aldrich's hands felt ice cold despite the warmth of his woolen robes as he followed Brother Matthias through the stone corridors of Greystone Abbey. His mind raced with possibilities, each more dire than the last. Had Eleanor been discovered? Had someone seen him visiting the grain storage building? Had his lies to Prior Benedict been transparent after all? He forced himself to breathe slowly, to maintain the calm exterior of a monk going about his duties, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. The prior's chambers were more crowded than Aldrich had ever seen them. Prior Benedict sat behind his desk, his thin face grave and troubled. Standing before him were 3 men in the dark blue and silver livery of House Ashford, their clothing marking them as men of some importance rather than common soldiers. The tallest of the 3, a man of perhaps 40 years with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, turned as Aldrich entered. "Ah, this must be Brother Aldrich," the man said, his voice cultured and authoritative. "I am Sir Robert Ashford, cousin to Lord Ashford and captain of his household guard. Prior Benedict tells me you are the Abbey's infirmarian and that you travel extensively throughout the region in your duties." Aldrich bowed respectfully, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I am, Sir Robert. How may I be of service?" Sir Robert exchanged glances with Prior Benedict before continuing. "We have received disturbing news regarding Lady Eleanor Pemberton. Her horse was found this morning, badly injured and abandoned in the forest not far from here. The animal had to be put down, but before it died, our huntsman examined it carefully. There were signs of a violent fall, broken saddle, bloodstains on the leather." Aldrich felt his stomach clench, but forced himself to show only appropriate concern. "That is indeed troubling news, Sir Robert. Was there any sign of Lady Eleanor herself?" "None, which is what concerns us most gravely," Sir Robert replied, his sharp eyes studying Aldrich's face. "The blood on the saddle suggests she may have been injured in the fall. We have searched the surrounding forest but found no trace of her. No body, no tracks, nothing. It is as if she simply vanished." Prior Benedict leaned forward in his chair. "Sir Robert has asked that we make our infirmary available should Lady Eleanor be found and in need of medical care. He has also requested that all of our brothers be questioned about whether they might have encountered her or heard any information regarding her whereabouts." "Of course," Aldrich said, his mind working frantically. The discovery of Eleanor's horse changed everything. They now knew approximately where she had fallen, which meant they would intensify their search in that area. It was only a matter of time before someone thought to check the old grain storage building. "I am happy to answer any questions, and the infirmary is always ready to provide care to those in need, regardless of their station or affiliation." Sir Robert nodded approvingly, spoken like a true man of God. "Now then, Brother Aldrich, I understand you were traveling in the region around the time Lady Eleanor disappeared. Did you see or hear anything unusual? Any sign of a noblewoman traveling alone or perhaps injured? This was the moment of truth. Aldrich could confess everything now, explain how he had found Eleanor and tended to her wounds. It might even be the wise choice. Bringing her to the Abbey's infirmary under Sir Robert's protection would ensure her safety and medical care. But it would also mean the end of any chance they had at a future together. Eleanor would be returned to her brother, forced into the marriage she had fled. Everything they had found together would be lost. "I saw nothing unusual, Sir Robert," Aldrich heard himself say, his voice steady despite the lie. "The storm that night was severe. I took shelter in a hunter's hut until morning, then continued on to Millbrook to tend to sick children there. The forest paths were treacherous, and I saw no other travelers." Sir Robert's eyes narrowed slightly, and Aldrich wondered if the man could somehow sense the deception. "This hunter's hut, where exactly is it located?" Aldrich described the location accurately, knowing that it could be easily verified and that being caught in a lie about something so easily checked would make everything else he said suspect. "I have used it before when weather makes travel dangerous. It is a sturdy structure, though crude. And you saw no sign that anyone else had recently been there? No indication that Lady Eleanor might have sought shelter in the same place?" "None, Sir Robert, though in truth, if she had been there before the storm, any tracks or signs would have been washed away by the rain." Sir Robert was silent for a long moment, his gaze boring into Aldrich with an intensity that made the monk want to look away. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well. If you should hear anything, see anything, or if anyone should come to you seeking medical treatment for injuries consistent with a fall from a horse, you will report it immediately to Prior Benedict, who will notify me. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Sir Robert." "Good. Because I should inform you that Lord Ashford has increased the reward for information leading to Lady Eleanor's safe recovery to 100 marks. A substantial sum that might tempt even the most virtuous soul to set aside their scruples." The implication was clear. Sir Robert suspected that someone might be hiding Eleanor, and he was making it known that betraying her location would be richly rewarded. Aldrich felt anger flash through him at the mercenary suggestion, but he kept his expression neutral. "I am a monk, Sir Robert. My vows preclude the acquisition of personal wealth. Any information I might learn would be shared out of duty and concern for Lady Eleanor's well-being, not for monetary gain." Sir Robert's lips curved in a slight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Of course. Forgive me if I gave offense. It is simply that this matter is of great importance to Lord Ashford, and we are pursuing every possible avenue of investigation." He turned to Prior Benedict. "Father Prior, I thank you for your cooperation. My men and I will be searching the surrounding area for the next several days. If we should need shelter or supplies, may we count on the Abbey's hospitality?" "Certainly, Sir Robert. Greystone Abbey stands ready to assist in any way we can." After Sir Robert and his men had departed, Prior Benedict gestured for Aldrich to remain. The elderly monk's expression was troubled as he studied his infirmarian. "Brother Aldrich, I hope you understand the gravity of this situation. A noblewoman is missing, possibly injured, possibly dead. If you know anything at all, you must speak now." Aldrich met his superior's gaze steadily, hating the necessity of the lie but seeing no alternative. "Father Prior, I have told Sir Robert everything I know. I saw no sign of Lady Eleanor during my travels." Prior Benedict sighed heavily. "Very well, you may go. But Brother Aldrich, remember that the truth has a way of revealing itself, no matter how carefully we try to conceal it. Pray that whatever secrets you may be keeping do not come back to haunt you." Aldrich left the prior's chambers with those ominous words ringing in his ears. He knew he should feel guilty, ashamed of the lies he had told, but all he could think about was Eleanor, alone in the grain storage building, unaware that search parties would soon be combing the area around where her horse had been found. He needed to warn her, needed to help her escape before it was too late. But leaving the Abbey now, so soon after his interview with Sir Robert, would be suspicious. He would have to wait until nightfall, until he could slip away under cover of darkness. The hours until then stretched before him like an eternity. Each minute weighted with anxiety and fear. Aldrich tried to occupy himself with his usual duties, tending to the Abbey's small infirmary, organizing his supplies, preparing remedies for the coming winter. But his mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios and possibilities. If Eleanor's hiding place was discovered, what would happen to her? What would happen to him? The best-case scenario was that he would be expelled from the monastery in disgrace. The worst case, he pushed that thought away, unwilling to contemplate the possibility of charges of kidnapping or worse. Brother Matthias found him in the herb garden as the afternoon light began to fade, pulling weeds with an intensity that suggested he was trying to work out some inner turmoil through physical labor. The old monk sat down heavily on a nearby bench, his joints creaking with age. "Aldrich, my son, I have known you long enough to recognize when something troubles you deeply. This business with Lady Eleanor has you worried, and I think it is more than simple concern for a missing noblewoman." Brother Matthias's voice was gentle, without accusation, but his words struck uncomfortably close to the truth. Aldrich sat back on his heels, wiping dirt from his hands. "You are right, Brother Matthias. I am troubled, but the nature of my troubles is something I cannot share, not yet. Perhaps not ever. I can only ask for your prayers and your trust." The old monk was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. When he spoke, his words surprised Aldrich. "I was not always a monk, you know. Before I took my vows, I was married. My wife died in childbirth, along with our son, when I was 25 years old. The grief nearly destroyed me, and I sought refuge in the monastery, believing that dedicating my life to God would somehow ease the pain of what I had lost." Aldrich had never heard this story before. Brother Matthias rarely spoke of his life before the abbey. "I did not know, brother. I am sorry for your loss. It was many years ago, and time has softened the sharp edges of that grief," Brother Matthias continued. "But I tell you this because I want you to understand something, Aldrich. I came to the monastery running from pain, seeking shelter from a world that had hurt me. You came here seeking purpose and peace, but neither of us came here because we had a true calling to the monastic life. We came because it seemed like the best option available to us at the time." He paused, fixing Aldrich with a penetrating gaze. "There is no shame in discovering that the path you chose no longer fits who you have become. The vows we take are sacred, yes, but God is also merciful. He understands that we are human, that we make mistakes, that we sometimes need to change direction. If you have found something or someone that makes you question your place here, do not dismiss it out of hand simply because it seems impossible or improper." Aldrich felt tears prick his eyes at the old monk's words. "And if pursuing this something or someone means breaking vows, disappointing people who depend on me, potentially bringing disgrace to this abbey, then you must weigh the cost against what you stand to gain," Brother Matthias said simply. "Life is full of difficult choices, my son, but sometimes the hardest choice is also the right one. I cannot tell you what to do. That decision must be yours alone. But I can tell you this. I would rather see you leave this abbey to pursue honest love and build a real life in the world than watch you waste away here, slowly dying inside while pretending to be content." The two men sat in silence as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Finally, Aldrich spoke. "Thank you, Brother Matthias, for your wisdom and for your understanding. I do not know yet what path I will take, but your words have given me much to think about." That is all an old man can hope for," Brother Matthias said with a slight smile. He rose creakily to his feet. "I will leave you to your thoughts, Aldrich. But remember, whatever you decide, you are not alone. There are those of us who care for you and wish you well, whatever form that well-being might take." As darkness fell over Greystone Abbey and the monks gathered for evening prayers, Aldrich went through the familiar rituals with a distracted mind. He needed to reach Eleanor tonight, needed to warn her about Sir Robert's search parties and the discovery of her horse. They would have to accelerate their plans, perhaps move her to a different location until the immediate danger passed. After the evening meal and the final prayers of Compline, Aldrich waited in his cell until he was certain the other monks had settled in for the night. Then, moving as quietly as possible, he gathered a few essential supplies and slipped out through a side door that led to the gardens. The night was dark, with clouds obscuring the moon, which would make travel difficult, but would also provide cover for his movements. He made his way to the stables and saddled his mare, cringing at every small sound that seemed magnified in the silence of the night. Just as he was about to lead the horse out, a voice from the shadows made him freeze. "Going somewhere, Brother Aldrich?" Aldrich's heart nearly stopped as he spun around to face the source of the voice. In the dim light filtering through the stable's open door, he could make out the familiar form of Brother Matthias, wrapped in a heavy cloak against the night chill. The old monk stepped forward, his weathered face unreadable in the shadows. "Brother Matthias," Aldrich said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I did not expect to find anyone awake at this hour." "Nor did you wish to, I imagine," the elderly monk replied, moving closer. His eyes, though aged, were sharp as they took in Aldrich's saddled horse and the supply bag slung over his shoulder. "The question is, where are you going in the middle of the night, and what compels you to sneak away like a thief, rather than leave openly in the light of day?" Aldrich stood frozen, torn between the truth and another lie. After their conversation in the garden, after the wisdom and understanding Brother Matthias had shown, he found he could not bring himself to deceive the old man further, yet neither could he simply confess everything and risk Eleanor's safety. "I cannot tell you where I am going, Brother Matthias, not because I do not trust you, but because the knowledge could put you in a difficult position. The less you know, the safer you will be if questions are asked." Brother Matthias studied him for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "This is about Lady Eleanor Pemberton, is it not? You know where she is. You have known all along." There seemed no point in denying it now. Aldrich nodded slowly. "Yes. I found her in the forest the night of the storm, badly injured from a fall from her horse. I treated her wounds and have been caring for her since. She was fleeing an unwanted marriage, Brother Matthias, a union that would have destroyed her spirit. I cannot betray her to those who would force her into such a fate. And you have developed feelings for her," Brother Matthias said quietly. "It was not a question, but a statement of fact. I saw it in your eyes this afternoon, heard it in your voice. This is not merely a healer's concern for a patient, is it?" "No," Aldrich admitted, the word barely audible. "I love her, Brother Matthias. God help me, I love her with all my heart, and she loves me in return. We know it is impossible. We know there are countless obstacles in our path, but we cannot help what we feel." The old monk was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful in the dim light. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Then you must go to her, Aldrich. If Sir Robert's men find her before you can warn her, she will be returned to her family and forced into the very marriage she fled. And you will spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have made a difference." Aldrich felt a surge of gratitude so intense it nearly brought him to his knees. "You are not going to try to stop me? You are not going to report this to Prior Benedict? What would that accomplish, except to bring suffering to two people who have already endured enough?" Brother Matthias moved closer and placed a weathered hand on Aldrich's shoulder. "I meant what I said this afternoon, my son. I have watched you serve faithfully for 8 years, never complaining, always putting the needs of others before your own. If you have finally found something, someone, who makes your heart sing, who am I to stand in your way? But the Abbey, my vows, Prior Benedict, will all still be here tomorrow and the day after." Brother Matthias interrupted. "But this woman, this chance at happiness may not be. Life is short, Aldrich, and true love is rarer than gold. When you find it, you must hold on to it with both hands, regardless of the cost." He paused, his grip on Aldrich's shoulder tightening slightly. "Now go. Warn her about the search parties. Help her escape to safety, and then decide what path your life will take." "I do not know how to thank you," Aldrich said, his voice thick with emotion. "Then do not try. Simply be happy, Aldrich. That will be thanks enough." Brother Matthias stepped back, waving him toward the stable door. "Go now, before someone else discovers you. And Aldrich, whatever you decide, know that you have my blessing and my prayers." Aldrich led his mare out into the night, his heart lighter despite the dangers that lay ahead. He mounted quickly and urged the horse into a careful trot, navigating the familiar paths more by feel than sight in the darkness. The journey to the grain storage building seemed to take forever, every shadow a potential threat, every sound a possible search party. When he finally arrived and pushed open the door, he found Eleanor awake and pacing, her face drawn with worry. She whirled at his entrance, relief flooding her features when she recognized him. "Aldrich, thank God, I have been so worried. You have never come this late before. I thought perhaps something had happened, that you had been discovered." "Something has happened," Aldrich interrupted, moving to her and taking her hands in his. "Eleanor, we need to leave. Tonight. Your horse was found this morning, and Sir Robert Ashford himself has come to the Abbey. They know you were injured in this area, and they are organizing search parties. It is only a matter of time before someone thinks to check this building." Eleanor's face paled, but she did not panic. Instead, her expression became focused and determined. "Then we must go immediately. Where will we go? The convent is still several days' ride from here." "I know a place," Aldrich said, his mind racing through the possibilities. "There is a small village called Thornbury, about a day's ride to the north. The village priest there, Father Edmund, is an old friend. He owes me several favors for medical care I have provided to his parishioners. We can go to him, explain the situation, and ask for his help in getting you safely to the convent." "And what about you?" Eleanor asked, her green eyes searching his face. "Aldrich, if you help me escape now, after lying to Sir Robert, you will be branded a traitor to House Ashford. You could be arrested, tried, even executed for aiding a fugitive." "I know the risks," Aldrich replied firmly, "but I also know that I cannot let you face this danger alone. We are in this together, Eleanor. Whatever comes, we will face it side by side." Eleanor threw her arms around him, holding him tightly. "I love you, Aldrich. I know this is madness. I know we are risking everything, but I cannot imagine my life without you now." "Nor I without you," Aldrich murmured into her hair. "Now come, we must gather what few things you have and leave immediately. Every moment we delay increases the chance of discovery." They worked quickly and efficiently, Eleanor gathering the spare dress and the few personal items Aldrich had brought her over the past days. Aldrich checked her wound one final time, pleased to find it healing well enough to withstand the journey ahead. He helped her into a heavy cloak he had brought, one that would protect her from the night chill and help disguise her identity should they encounter anyone on the road. As they prepared to leave, Eleanor paused at the door and looked back at the simple stone building that had been her shelter for the past week. "Strange," she murmured. "I should be glad to leave this place, yet part of me is sad. It is here that I found you, here that we discovered what we mean to each other. We carry those moments with us," Aldrich said softly. "No matter where we go, no matter what happens, what we found here will always be a part of us." They mounted Aldrich's horse together, Eleanor sitting in front of him as she had when he had first brought her to this hiding place. The night was still dark, the clouds thick overhead, but Aldrich knew these paths well enough to navigate them even in limited visibility. They set off at a careful pace, heading north toward Thornbury and whatever fate awaited them there. As they rode through the darkness, Aldrich found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. Just over a week ago, he had been a simple monk, content in his duties, secure in his vows, certain of his path in life. Now he was fleeing in the night with a woman he loved, having lied to his superiors, betrayed the trust of those who depended on him, and potentially destroyed the peaceful life he had built. Yet he could not bring himself to regret any of it. Not the moment he had found Eleanor in the forest, not the decision to hide and care for her, not the love that had grown between them. For the first time in his life, he felt truly alive, as though he had been sleepwalking through his days at the monastery, and had only now awakened to experience the full range of human emotion and connection. Eleanor seemed to sense his thoughts. Without turning around, she reached back and squeezed his hand where it rested on the reins. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed in such a short time," Aldrich admitted. "About how one decision, one moment, can alter the entire course of a life. Do you regret it? Any of it?" "Not for a moment," Aldrich said firmly. "You are worth any price I might have to pay, Eleanor. You are worth everything." They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle clop of the horses' hooves and the whisper of wind through the trees. But as dawn began to break on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they heard something that made Aldrich's blood run cold, the distant sound of multiple horses, moving fast, coming from the direction of the grain storage building they had just fled. "They have found it," Eleanor whispered, her body tensing. "They know I was there, which means they will be looking for tracks, for any sign of which direction we went," Aldrich said, his mind working frantically. "We need to get off the main path, cover our trail somehow." He guided the horse off the road and into the forest, moving as quickly as he dared through the underbrush. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, and Aldrich knew it was only a matter of time before skilled hunters picked up their trail. They needed to do something unexpected, something that would throw their pursuers off the scent. An idea came to him, born of desperation and half-remembered tales from his childhood. "Eleanor, there is a stream not far from here. If we can reach it and follow it for a distance, the water will hide our tracks and our scent. It is not much, but it might buy us enough time to reach Thornbury." "Then let us try it," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the fear he could hear beneath it. "I trust you, Aldrich." They pushed through the forest, branches catching at their clothes and scratching their faces. Aldrich could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, could feel the trembling in Eleanor's body where she sat pressed against him. The sounds of pursuit seemed to be getting closer, the shouts of men and the baying of hunting dogs carrying through the morning air. Finally, they broke through a line of trees and found themselves on the bank of a narrow stream, its waters swift and cold from recent rains. Without hesitation, Aldrich urged his mare into the water. The horse balked for a moment, then stepped in, the icy water rising to her knees. They began moving upstream, the current tugging at the horse's legs, making each step treacherous. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit reached the edge of the forest. Aldrich could hear dogs barking, men shouting to each other as they searched for the trail. He held his breath, praying that his plan would work, that the water would hide their scent long enough for them to escape. They followed the stream for what felt like hours but was probably closer to 30 minutes, until Aldrich judged they had put enough distance between themselves and their pursuers. Then he guided the mare out of the water on the opposite bank and back into the forest, heading once more toward Thornbury. "Do you think it worked?" Eleanor asked, her teeth chattering slightly from the cold and from delayed shock. "Do you think we lost them?" "I do not know," Aldrich admitted, "but it was the best chance we had. Now we must simply keep moving and pray that we reach Father Edmund before they pick up our trail again." As they rode on through the brightening morning, Aldrich found himself offering up silent prayers for their safety, for Eleanor's protection, and for the wisdom to know what to do when they finally reached their destination. They had taken a desperate gamble, fleeing in the night with Sir Robert's men in pursuit. Their lives, their future, everything they hoped for, hung in the balance. But as he felt Eleanor lean back against him, as he wrapped his arms more securely around her, Aldrich knew that whatever happened, they would face it together. And that knowledge, that certainty of their love and their commitment to one another, gave him strength to continue. The sun had climbed higher in the sky by the time Aldrich and Eleanor finally saw the modest village of Thornbury emerging from the morning mist. The settlement consisted of perhaps 30 small cottages clustered around a stone church, with fields of wheat and barley stretching out beyond. Smoke rose from chimneys, carrying the scent of cooking fires and baking bread. It was a peaceful scene, one that seemed impossibly far removed from the danger and desperation that had driven them here. Aldrich guided his exhausted mare toward the church, which stood at the center of the village like a shepherd watching over its flock. The building was old, its stones weathered by centuries of English rain and wind, but it was well maintained, with a sturdy roof and freshly painted door. As they dismounted, several villagers stopped their morning tasks to stare at the unusual sight of a monk and a woman arriving together, both looking disheveled and exhausted from hard travel. Before Aldrich could knock, the church door opened and a man in his 50s emerged, his round face creased with concern. Father Edmund was shorter than Aldrich, with a generous belly that spoke of good living, and a kind disposition evident in his warm brown eyes. Those eyes widened in surprise when he recognized his visitor. "Brother Aldrich, what brings you to Thornbury in such a state? And who is this young woman?" Father Edmund's gaze moved to Eleanor, taking in her fine features and the quality of her clothing beneath the travel-stained cloak. "Is something wrong?" "Father Edmund, I need your help desperately," Aldrich said, his voice low and urgent. "May we speak inside, away from curious eyes?" The village priest's expression grew serious, but he nodded immediately and ushered them into the church. The interior was cool and dim, lit by candles and the colored light filtering through stained glass windows. Father Edmund led them past the simple wooden pews to a small room at the back that served as his study and living quarters. Once the door was closed, Father Edmund turned to face them, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "Now then, Brother Aldrich, I can see that you are in trouble. Tell me what has happened, and do not leave anything out. I cannot help you if I do not know the full truth." Aldrich took a deep breath and began to speak, telling Father Edmund everything. He described finding Eleanor wounded in the forest, the decision to hide and care for her, rather than turn her over to the authorities, the love that had grown between them, and finally their flight from the grain storage building with Sir Robert's men in pursuit. Eleanor stood beside him throughout the telling, her hand clasped tightly in his, lending him strength. When Aldrich finished, Father Edmund was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. He moved to a small table and poured wine into 3 cups, handing one to each of them before taking a long drink from his own. Finally he spoke. "This is a more serious matter than I expected, Brother Aldrich. You have not merely broken your vows or defied your superiors. You have become entangled in a political dispute between 2 powerful houses. Sir Robert Ashford is not a man to be trifled with, and if he believes you have kidnapped Lady Eleanor, he will pursue you to the ends of the earth." "I know," Aldrich said quietly. "But what else could I have done? Eleanor was fleeing a marriage that would have destroyed her. She needed help, and I was the only one who could provide it." Father Edmund turned to Eleanor, his gaze assessing. "And you, my lady, is this truly what you want? To throw away your position, your family, everything you have known, for love of this monk? There is still time to return to your family, to claim that you were injured and lost, that Brother Aldrich simply cared for your wounds and meant no harm." Eleanor met the priest's gaze steadily, her green eyes clear and certain. "I will not return to a marriage with Sir Hugh Denholm, Father. I would rather die than be given to that cruel man like a piece of property. As for Brother Aldrich, I love him with all my heart. Yes, our situation is complicated and dangerous, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Father Edmund studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. "I can see that you speak the truth, my lady. Very well. You came here seeking my help, and I will give it, though I warn you both that the path ahead will not be easy." He moved to his desk and began pulling out various documents and letters. "First, we must address the immediate danger of Sir Robert's pursuit. We need to get you both to safety before his men track you here. I had hoped Eleanor might stay here while I petition the church for release from my vows," Aldrich said. "Then once I am free, we could be married and—" "No," Father Edmund interrupted firmly. "That plan will take too long, and you do not have time. Sir Robert's men could arrive at any moment, and when they do, they will search every building in this village. You cannot stay here." He paused, tapping his fingers on the desk as he thought. "However, I may have a solution. There is a monastery in Scotland near the border, whose abbot owes me a considerable favor. It is a remote place, far from the reach of English nobles and their disputes. You could both take refuge there while we sort out the legal complications of your situation." "Scotland?" Eleanor asked, surprise evident in her voice. "That is weeks of travel from here, through dangerous country." "Precisely why it is ideal," Father Edmund replied. "Sir Robert will expect you to head for a nearby convent or to try to reach Eleanor's family in France. He will not think to look for you in Scotland, at least not immediately, and the monastery there has a reputation for offering sanctuary to those fleeing persecution. The abbot, Father Malcolm, is a good man who values love and compassion over rigid adherence to rules." Aldrich felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time since they had fled the grain storage building. This could work. If we can reach Scotland safely, we would have time to petition the church properly, to arrange for the annulment of my vows, and to seek Eleanor's freedom from her family's authority. "It could work," Father Edmund agreed, "but you must understand the risks. The journey to Scotland is long and perilous, especially for 2 people traveling alone. You will need to avoid the main roads, stay away from towns where you might be recognized, and even if you reach the monastery safely, there is no guarantee that the church will grant your petitions. You may be trading one impossible situation for another." Eleanor squeezed Aldrich's hand. "We understand the risks, Father Edmund, but we have already chosen this path. We will see it through to whatever end awaits us." Father Edmund nodded approvingly. "Spoken with true courage, my lady." "Very well then. I will provide you with supplies for the journey, letters of introduction to Father Malcolm, and what guidance I can offer for the safest routes north. But you must leave immediately. Every hour you delay increases the chance that Sir Robert's men will find you." Over the next hour, Father Edmund worked with remarkable efficiency. He provided them with food, fresh clothing, a map showing the safer paths to Scotland, and a small purse of coins. He also wrote several letters, one to Father Malcolm explaining their situation and requesting sanctuary, another to a bishop he knew who might be sympathetic to their cause, and a third to Prior Benedict at Greystone Abbey. "This letter to Prior Benedict explains that you came to me for counsel, and that I advised you to seek sanctuary while sorting out your spiritual crisis," Father Edmund explained as he sealed the parchment. "It is not the whole truth, but it may help protect the Abbey from accusations of complicity in your flight. The good brothers there do not deserve to suffer for your choices." "Thank you, Father," Aldrich said, his voice thick with emotion. "I do not know how I can ever repay your kindness. Live a good life, Brother Aldrich. Love this woman well and truly. Be happy. That will be repayment enough." Father Edmund turned to Eleanor and took her hand gently. "And you, my lady, guard this man's heart as carefully as he guards yours. What you have found together is precious and rare. Do not let the world's judgment or the difficulties ahead make you doubt it." "I will not, Father. I promise you that." As Aldrich and Eleanor prepared to leave, Father Edmund blessed them both, making the sign of the cross over their bowed heads. "May God guide your steps and keep you safe from those who would do you harm. May He grant you the wisdom to navigate the challenges ahead and the strength to face whatever trials come. And may He bless the love that binds you together, making it a light in the darkness and a shelter in the storm." They left Thornbury as quietly as they had arrived, riding out on a fresh horse that Father Edmund had insisted they take, their exhausted mare left behind to rest and recover. The village priest had given them detailed instructions for the first part of their journey: roads to avoid, safe places to stop, people who might offer them shelter and aid. As the village disappeared behind them and they headed north into increasingly wild country, Eleanor turned in the saddle to look at Aldrich. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Terrified," Aldrich admitted. "Everything I have known, everything I have built over the past 8 years, I am leaving behind. I do not know what the future holds, or if we will even survive this journey, but I am also happier than I have ever been, because I am with you." Eleanor smiled, the expression transforming her already beautiful face into something radiant. "Then we will be terrified and happy together, and somehow that seems fitting." They rode through the day, keeping to smaller paths and wooded areas where they would be less visible. As evening approached, they found shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut, similar to the one where Aldrich had first tended Eleanor's wounds. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had been barely more than a week. As they settled in for the night, sharing bread and cheese from Father Edmund's supplies, Eleanor examined the wound on her side. The stitches had held well during their flight, and the skin around them looked healthy. "You did excellent work, Dr. Aldrich," she said with a teasing smile. "I think I will barely have a scar." "You will always have a scar," Aldrich corrected gently, "but it will fade with time, and perhaps years from now, it will simply be a reminder of how we met, of the beginning of our story." "I like that thought," Eleanor said, moving closer to him. "The scar as the start of something beautiful, rather than a mark of trauma and pain." They sat together in the firelight, talking quietly about their hopes and fears for the future. Eleanor spoke of her dreams of a simple life, free from the machinations of noble politics. Aldrich confessed his uncertainty about who he would be without the structure and identity of monastic life. But through it all ran a current of certainty about one thing: their love for each other and their commitment to building a life together, whatever form that might take. As they prepared to sleep, Eleanor curled up against Aldrich's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Aldrich," she said quietly, "when we reach Scotland, when all of this is settled and we are finally free to marry, I want you to know that I will be proud to be your wife. Not because of any title or position, but because of the man you are. The kindness in your heart, the strength of your convictions, the way you see me as a person rather than a possession. Those are the things that matter." Aldrich pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair. "And I will be honored to call you my wife, Eleanor. You have shown me what it means to truly live, to feel deeply, to love without reservation. Whatever challenges we face, whatever sacrifices we must make, it will all be worth it to spend my life with you." The next morning, they rose with the dawn and continued their journey north. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled, becoming more rugged and wild. They passed through forests of oak and ash, crossed rivers swollen with autumn rains, climbed hills that offered sweeping views of the countryside stretching out below them. On the third day of their journey, as they were following a narrow path through a particularly dense section of forest, they heard the sound they had been dreading, horses approaching fast from behind them. Aldrich urged their mount to greater speed. but he knew they could not outrun pursuers on the winding forest path. "We need to hide," he said urgently. "There, that outcropping of rocks. We can conceal the horse and ourselves behind it." They dismounted quickly and led their horse behind the large formation of boulders, pressing themselves flat against the cold stone. Eleanor's hand found Aldrich's and gripped it tightly as the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. Through a gap in the rocks, Aldrich could see riders emerging from the trees. 4 men in the livery of House Ashford, their faces grim and determined. The riders slowed as they reached the spot where Aldrich and Eleanor had left the path, and for a terrifying moment, Aldrich was certain they had been discovered. One of the men dismounted and examined the ground, clearly looking for tracks. Aldrich held his breath, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure it could be heard. Then, miraculously, the rider shook his head and remounted. "The trail goes cold here," he called to his companions. "They must have gone west toward the main road. Come on, we are wasting time." The riders spurred their horses forward and disappeared into the forest, heading in the wrong direction. Aldrich and Eleanor remained hidden for several long minutes after the sounds of pursuit had faded, neither daring to move or speak. Finally, when he was certain the danger had passed, Aldrich released the breath he had been holding. "That was too close," Eleanor whispered, her face pale. "Aldrich, they will not stop searching. Even if we reach Scotland, even if Father Malcolm grants us sanctuary, Sir Robert will not give up easily." "I know," Aldrich acknowledged, "but we have come this far, and we cannot turn back now. We simply have to keep moving, keep hoping, and trust that somehow we will find our way to safety and freedom." They continued their journey with renewed caution, avoiding even the smallest paths during the day, and traveling primarily at night. It was slower and more exhausting, but it kept them hidden from Sir Robert's search parties. Each day brought them closer to the Scottish border, closer to the sanctuary Father Edmund had promised, closer to the possibility of a future together. The Scottish border appeared before them on a morning wrapped in thick mist, the landscape transforming into something wilder and more ancient than the English countryside they had left behind. Rolling hills covered in heather stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with rocky outcroppings and stands of pine trees that seemed to have stood sentinel for centuries. The air itself felt different here, cleaner and sharper, carrying the promise of freedom and new beginnings. Aldrich and Eleanor had been traveling for nearly 2 weeks, their journey marked by close calls with search parties, nights spent sleeping under the stars, and days of pushing forward despite exhaustion and uncertainty. But they had also experienced moments of profound beauty and connection. Sunrises watched from hilltops, conversations that lasted deep into the night, the simple comfort of knowing they faced everything together. Eleanor's wound had healed remarkably well during their travels, the stitches Aldrich had placed doing their work perfectly. Just 3 days earlier, in the shelter of a friendly farmer's barn, Aldrich had carefully removed the stitches, pleased to see that the scar was thin and clean, exactly as he had hoped. Eleanor had watched him work with that familiar intensity in her green eyes, and when he had finished, she had kissed him with a passion that still made his heart race to remember. Now, as they guided their horse across a shallow stream that marked the border between England and Scotland, Aldrich felt something loosen in his chest. They were not safe yet. Sir Robert's reach could extend even here if he was determined enough, but they had crossed a significant threshold. They were in a different land now, outside the immediate jurisdiction of English nobles and their disputes. "How much further to the monastery?" Eleanor asked, her voice hoarse from days of limited water and constant travel. Despite the hardships of their journey, she had never complained, had faced every challenge with remarkable courage and resilience. "According to Father Edmund's map, it should be just beyond that ridge," Aldrich replied, pointing to a line of hills in the distance. "The monastery of St. Columba, hidden in a valley where few travelers venture. We should reach it by nightfall if we maintain our pace." They pressed on, their weary horse picking its way carefully across the rocky Scottish terrain. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, they finally saw it. A cluster of stone buildings nestled in a green valley, smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of bells calling the monks to evening prayer carrying across the distance. The monastery was larger than Greystone Abbey, its buildings arranged around a central courtyard with the impressive church at its heart. But despite its size, there was a warmth to the place that Aldrich had not felt at his former home. Perhaps it was the way the golden evening light bathed the stones, or perhaps it was simply the hope that had sustained them through their long journey finally taking tangible form. As they approached the main gate, a monk emerged to greet them. He was a tall man with red hair going gray and a face marked by laughter lines around his eyes. His expression was curious but welcoming as he took in the sight of the exhausted travelers. "Good evening, friends. I am Brother Callum. You look as though you have come a long way. How may St. Columba's offer you hospitality?" "We seek Father Malcolm," Aldrich said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "I am Brother Aldrich of Greystone Abbey in England, and this is Lady Eleanor Pemberton. Father Edmund of Thornbury sent us with letters of introduction and a request for sanctuary." Brother Callum's eyebrows rose at this, but his welcoming expression did not falter. "Father Malcolm will certainly wish to speak with you. Please come inside. You both look as though you could use a warm meal and a safe place to rest." They were led through the courtyard and into a comfortable receiving room where a fire blazed in a large hearth. Brother Callum brought them bread, cheese, and ale, instructing them to eat while he fetched the abbot. Aldrich and Eleanor fell upon the food with the hunger of people who had been living on meager rations for too long, the simple fare tasting like a feast. When Father Malcolm entered the room, Aldrich understood immediately why Father Edmund had spoken so highly of him. The abbot was a man in his 60s with iron-gray hair and eyes of startling blue that seemed to see straight into a person's soul. But those eyes were kind, and when he smiled in greeting, his entire face transformed with genuine warmth. "Brother Aldrich, Lady Eleanor, welcome to St. Columba's. Brother Callum tells me you have traveled from England seeking sanctuary. That is quite a journey, especially at this time of year." He settled into a chair across from them, his posture relaxed despite the unusual circumstances. "Now then, suppose you tell me your story from the beginning. I find that understanding the full truth of a situation is essential before offering help." For the second time in their journey, Aldrich recounted everything that had happened, from finding Eleanor wounded in the forest to their flight from Sir Robert's search parties. Father Malcolm listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful, occasionally nodding as certain points were made. Eleanor added her own perspective, describing the marriage she had fled and her growing love for the man who had saved her life. When they finished, Father Malcolm was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Finally, he spoke. "You have both taken enormous risks and made difficult choices. The path you have chosen will not be easy, even with the sanctuary we can offer here. Brother Aldrich, renouncing your monastic vows is a serious matter that will require petitions to the bishop and possibly even to Rome. Lady Eleanor, your family will not simply accept your disappearance, and your betrothed's family may demand compensation or even revenge for the slight to their honor." "We understand, Father Malcolm," Aldrich said quietly. "But we are committed to seeing this through, whatever it takes. We love each other, and we believe that God would not have brought us together only to keep us apart." Father Malcolm's stern expression softened into a smile. "I believe you are right, my son. Love is a gift from God, not a sin to be punished. And I have seen too many lives wasted in service to rules and traditions that prioritize order over compassion." He stood and moved to a window overlooking the valley. "I will grant you sanctuary here at St. Columba's for as long as you need it. Brother Aldrich, you may work in our infirmary while we petition the church for your release from vows. Lady Eleanor, you will be given quarters in our guest house and may help our sisters at the affiliated convent nearby if you wish. In time, we will see about arranging a proper marriage for you both." Relief flooded through Aldrich so powerfully that he felt tears prick his eyes. "Thank you, Father Malcolm. Thank you for understanding, for not judging us, for offering us hope when we had almost lost it. Thank you for reminding an old monk what truly matters," Father Malcolm replied. "Now, you both need rest. Tomorrow we can begin addressing the practical matters, but tonight simply be grateful that you have found safety." They were shown to separate quarters, Aldrich to a small cell in the monk's dormitory, Eleanor to a comfortable room in the guest house. As Aldrich lay on his narrow bed that night, too exhausted to even remove his boots, he felt a peace settle over him that he had not experienced in weeks. They had made it, against all odds, through dangers and difficulties that might have broken lesser souls. They had reached sanctuary. The next morning, Father Malcolm summoned them both to his study and laid out a plan for moving forward. He would write to a bishop he knew personally, explaining Aldrich's situation and requesting that the process of releasing him from his vows be expedited. He would also send discreet inquiries about Eleanor's family, trying to determine if there might be any possibility of reconciliation, or at least acceptance of her choice. However, Father Malcolm cautioned, we must be realistic. Your brother, Lord Pemberton, has significant political motivations for your marriage to Sir Hugh Denholm, and Sir Robert Ashford's pride has been injured by your flight. They may pursue this matter with considerable determination. Then what do you suggest? Eleanor asked. Patience for now. You are safe here, protected by the Church's right to offer sanctuary. Let them search for you in vain. Let their anger cool with time. Meanwhile, we will work through the proper channels to secure your freedom legally and permanently. Father Malcolm paused, his blue eyes moving between them. But I will not lie to you. This process could take months, possibly even years. Are you prepared for such a long wait? Aldrich reached for Eleanor's hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. We have already waited our entire lives to find each other, Father Malcolm. We can wait a while longer if it means we can be together properly, with the Church's blessing and without fear of pursuit. Well spoken, Father Malcolm said approvingly. Then let us begin. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that was both familiar and new for Aldrich. He rose with the monks for morning prayers, though he noticed that Father Malcolm's approach to monastic life was more flexible and compassionate than what he had known at Greystone Abbey. After prayers, he worked in the monastery's infirmary, treating monks who fell ill and villagers from the surrounding area who sought medical help. But now there were also afternoons spent with Eleanor, walking through the monastery gardens or sitting by the fire in the guest-house common room, talking about everything and nothing. There were stolen moments of privacy where they could hold each other, kiss without fear of discovery, plan for the future they would build together. Eleanor, for her part, had found purpose working with the sisters at the affiliated convent. They taught her skills she had never learned as a noblewoman: how to bake bread, how to make candles, how to tend to the sick and elderly. She approached these tasks with the same intelligence and determination she brought to everything, and the sisters quickly grew to love her. 2 months after their arrival, Father Malcolm received a response to his petition regarding Aldrich's vows. The bishop was sympathetic to their situation and agreed that Aldrich had entered monastic life at a young age, without fully understanding what he was committing to. However, the process of formal release would still take time, requiring testimonies from Aldrich's superiors at Greystone Abbey and a period of reflection to ensure he was certain of his decision. Brother Matthias, bless him, had written a letter that brought tears to Aldrich's eyes. The old monk testified to Aldrich's faithful service, but also to his observation that Aldrich had never seemed truly called to monastic life, that he had chosen it more from lack of options than from genuine vocation. He spoke of the change he had seen in Aldrich during his final weeks at the Abbey, the signs of a man discovering what his heart truly desired. And he concluded by saying that if Aldrich's happiness lay in the world rather than the cloister, then the world would be blessed to have him. News about Eleanor's family was more troubling. Lord Pemberton was furious at her disappearance and had declared her disobedient and ungrateful. Sir Hugh Denholm, the man she had been meant to marry, had demanded compensation for the insult to his honor. Sir Robert Ashford continued to search for them, though his efforts were focused on England and had not yet extended to Scotland. They will not stop looking, Eleanor said one evening as she and Aldrich sat together in the garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. My brother's pride will not allow him to simply let this matter drop. Then we will face that challenge when it comes, Aldrich replied, his arm around her shoulders. For now, we are safe. We are together. And each day that passes brings us closer to being able to marry legitimately. Do you ever regret it? Eleanor asked quietly. Leaving the Abbey? Giving up the life you knew? I sometimes worry that I have been selfish, that I have taken you away from a calling that gave you purpose. Aldrich turned to face her, cupping her face gently in his hands. Eleanor, listen to me carefully. You have not taken me from anything. You have given me everything. Before I found you, I was going through the motions of life, serving faithfully, but without passion, praying without real connection to the divine. You woke me up, showed me what it means to truly live, to love, to feel deeply. I have never been more certain of anything than I am of my love for you and my desire to spend my life with you. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you, Aldrich, so very much. And I love you, my Eleanor. Today, tomorrow, and all the days that follow." 6 months after their arrival at St. Columba's, the formal approval came from the bishop. Aldrich's petition for release from his monastic vows had been granted. He was no longer bound by his promises of poverty, chastity, and obedience. He was free to marry, to own property, to live as a regular man in the world. The news was celebrated throughout the monastery, with even the strictest monks acknowledging that sometimes God's plan for a person led away from the cloister rather than deeper into it. Father Malcolm declared that the wedding would take place at St. Columba's, that he himself would perform the ceremony, and that it would be a celebration of love and faith overcoming obstacles. But there was still one more challenge to face. 2 weeks before the planned wedding, a delegation arrived at the monastery gates. Lord Pemberton himself, accompanied by Sir Hugh Denholm and a contingent of armed men. They demanded an audience with Father Malcolm and with Eleanor. Father Malcolm received them in the monastery's great hall, with Aldrich and Eleanor standing beside him. Lord Pemberton was a tall man in his early 30s, with Eleanor's same dark hair and green eyes, but where her expression was warm and open, his was cold and calculating. Sir Hugh Denholm was older, perhaps 45, with a cruel set to his mouth and eyes that held no kindness. "So this is where you have been hiding, sister," Lord Pemberton said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Living in sin with a monk who abandoned his vows for you. Do you have any idea of the shame you have brought upon our family?" "I am not living in sin," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the fear Aldrich could sense beneath it. "Brother Aldrich has been released from his vows, and we are to be married with the Church's blessing. We have done nothing wrong." "Nothing wrong?" Sir Hugh Denholm's voice was harsh. "You were promised to me, contracted to become my wife. That contract represents a considerable financial and political investment. You cannot simply run away and pretend those obligations do not exist." Father Malcolm stepped forward, his presence commanding despite his age. "Lady Eleanor sought sanctuary here at St. Columba's, which is her right under church law. Brother Aldrich has been properly released from his vows through the appropriate ecclesiastical channels. They have broken no laws, violated no sacred trusts. Their marriage will be legitimate in the eyes of both God and man." "And what of the insult to my honor?" Sir Hugh demanded. "What compensation will I receive for this public humiliation?" "Your honor was never at risk," Eleanor said sharply. "I was never truly yours, Sir Hugh. A contract signed by my brother without my consent is not binding in the eyes of God, no matter what human laws might say." Lord Pemberton's face flushed with anger. "You ungrateful girl. I gave you everything, comfort, status, a future secured. And this is how you repay me? By running off with a commoner who has nothing to offer you but poverty and obscurity?" "He offers me love," Eleanor said quietly. "He offers me respect, partnership, the freedom to be myself, rather than a decorative prize to be bartered for political advantage. That is worth more than all the gold and status in the world." "You are a fool," Lord Pemberton spat. "But you are still my sister, and I will not allow you to throw your life away on this fantasy. You will return home with me today, or I will petition the Church to have this so-called sanctuary revoked." "I am afraid that will not be possible, Lord Pemberton," Father Malcolm said calmly. "Lady Eleanor is an adult woman of sound mind who has made her choice freely and without coercion. The Church's right to offer sanctuary is absolute, and no petition from you will change that. Furthermore, threatening the Church is unlikely to endear you to the very bishops whose favor you would need to pursue such a petition." For a moment, Aldrich thought Lord Pemberton might actually attack them. The nobleman's hand moved to his sword, and the armed men he had brought tensed, ready for violence. But Father Malcolm did not flinch, and something in his steady gaze seemed to give Lord Pemberton pause. Finally, Sir Hugh Denholm spoke, his voice cold and calculated. "Perhaps we can reach an accommodation. I am willing to release Lady Eleanor from our marriage contract in exchange for appropriate compensation. Say, the equivalent value in gold of what I was promised in her dowry." "I have no gold to give you," Eleanor said. "Everything I owned remained with my family when I fled." "Then your monk can pay it," Sir Hugh suggested with a cruel smile. "Unless he truly has nothing to offer you, as your brother suggests." Aldrich felt rage boil up inside him, but before he could respond, Father Malcolm held up a hand. I believe a solution can be arranged that satisfies honor without requiring impoverishment. St. Columba's will provide the compensation Sir Hugh seeks, in exchange for a formal release of all claims on Lady Eleanor, and a signed agreement that neither you, Lord Pemberton, nor you, Sir Hugh, will pursue any further action against her or Brother Aldrich. Father Malcolm, we cannot accept, Aldrich began, but the abbot silenced him with a look. The monastery has resources, my son, and we choose to use them in service of justice and compassion. This is not charity, but rather an investment in your future together. He turned back to the nobleman. Do we have an agreement, gentlemen? Lord Pemberton and Sir Hugh exchanged glances, clearly not satisfied but recognizing that they were unlikely to get a better offer. Finally, Lord Pemberton nodded curtly. Very well. Have the documents drawn up and the gold counted. But know this, Eleanor, you are no longer my sister. You have chosen your path, and it leads away from our family. Do not expect any support or recognition from us in the future. I expect nothing from you, Eleanor replied, her voice sad but firm. I hoped you might understand, might wish me happiness even if it was not the happiness you planned for me. But I see now that was a foolish hope. Go with God, brother, and I pray that someday you will understand what you have lost by valuing politics over love. The documents were drawn up that very day, witnessed by Father Malcolm and several of the senior monks. Sir Hugh received his compensation. Lord Pemberton signed away all rights and claims to his sister, and by nightfall, the delegation had departed, leaving Aldrich and Eleanor free at last. 2 weeks later, on a bright autumn morning with the Scottish hills ablaze in gold and crimson, Aldrich and Eleanor were married in the church of St. Columba's. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, attended by all the monks and sisters who had come to care for the couple during their time at the monastery. Eleanor wore a dress of deep blue wool that the sisters had made for her, embroidered with silver thread and patterns of flowers and stars. Her dark hair was unbound, flowing down her back in waves, crowned with a circlet of autumn flowers. She had never looked more beautiful, and when Aldrich saw her walking toward him down the church aisle, he felt his breath catch in his throat. Aldrich wore the finest clothes he had ever owned, provided by Father Malcolm, a tunic of forest green over a white linen shirt, with brown breeches and leather boots. He had trimmed his beard carefully that morning, and Brother Callum had assured him he looked every inch a proper bridegroom. Father Malcolm performed the ceremony with joy evident in his voice, speaking of love as a sacred gift, of marriage as a partnership blessed by God, of two souls finding their way to each other despite all obstacles. When it came time for the vows, Aldrich spoke his with absolute certainty, promising to love Eleanor, to honor her, to stand beside her in all the days to come. Eleanor's vows were equally heartfelt, her green eyes shining with tears of happiness as she pledged her life and love to him. When Father Malcolm pronounced them husband and wife, when Aldrich finally kissed Eleanor as her husband rather than as a forbidden love, the entire church erupted in cheers and applause. It was a sound of pure joy, of celebration for two people who had risked everything for love and had finally, against all odds, won their happiness. The celebration that followed was lively and warm, with food and drink provided by the monastery, music played by talented brothers, and dancing that lasted well into the evening. Aldrich and Eleanor moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations, thanking those who had helped them, but mostly just looking at each other with wonder and joy. As the evening drew to a close and they retired to the cottage that Father Malcolm had given them as a wedding gift, a small stone building on the monastery grounds where they could begin their married life, Aldrich pulled Eleanor into his arms and held her close. "We did it," he whispered into her hair. "Against impossible odds, despite every obstacle, we did it. You are my wife, Eleanor, my wife, and you are my husband," Eleanor replied, her voice filled with emotion. "The man who saved my life and then gave me a reason to live it. I love you, Aldrich. I will love you until my dying day and beyond." They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, feeling the weight of all they had endured and the joy of all they had gained. Then Aldrich swept Eleanor into his arms and carried her across the threshold of their new home, both of them laughing with the pure delight of being together, finally and forever. In the years that followed, Aldrich and Eleanor built a life that was simple, but rich in all the ways that mattered. Aldrich became the primary healer for the village near the monastery, his skills and compassion earning him respect and gratitude. Eleanor worked alongside him, learning the art of healing and discovering she had a gift for it. Together they helped countless people, saved numerous lives, and earned a reputation for wisdom and kindness. They never returned to England, never sought reconciliation with Eleanor's family. The life they had known before finding each other faded into memory, replaced by something far more precious, a partnership built on love, respect, and mutual support. They had children, 3 daughters who inherited their mother's beauty and intelligence, and their father's strength and compassion. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year rather than fading. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the work of the day was done, they would sit together by the fire and remember how it had all begun, with a wounded noblewoman in a forest and a monk who chose love over duty. They would remember the risks they had taken, the obstacles they had overcome, and they would marvel at how a single moment of compassion had changed both their lives forever. Father Malcolm, who had given them sanctuary and guided them through their most difficult times, remained a close friend until his death at the age of 83. At his funeral, Aldrich spoke of the old abbot's wisdom and compassion, of how he had understood that sometimes the rules must bend in service of love. And Eleanor wept, grateful to the end for the man who had seen 2 desperate souls and offered them not judgment but hope. Their story became legend in the small Scottish village, told and retold by firesides on winter nights, the tale of the monk who saved a noblewoman and discovered that sometimes the greatest sin is not following your heart, but denying it. It was a story of courage and sacrifice, of love triumphant over duty and tradition, of 2 people who risked everything and found that what they gained was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. And in the end, that was the truth that sustained them through all their years together, that love, true love, freely given and freely received, was worth any price, any sacrifice, any risk. It was the most precious gift God could bestow, and they had been blessed to find it in each other.